yeah, yeah. And Denzel. Denzel. I'm right.
Check. Can you hear anything?
Yeah.
Check, check.
Yeah.
Morning. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Does that sound all right? Check, check 1 2 3 4. So when the room's quiet, you'll be able to hear. That's it.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It's on. It's not. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If I could have your attention, please. We have a very full room this morning, which is a sign of a healthy democracy, and I welcome you all here. If I could just ask over in this corner here, we could just. Yeah, well, actually, it is. Yes, it's just that the noise level is so high that you can't hear me. But all right. There's still quite a lot of. I know. I think Julie puts it down every meeting just to. Let me see where they. I know. Let me just see about that. There we go. I think Councillor Carroll comes and moves it down every time, so I'll be sitting with my head barely above the table. Good morning to one and all. May I just say at the outset, we do have an overflow room in Committee Room 2, and I think the proceedings will be there on television. And so for those who are not able to sit, you might be more comfortable in that other room. And it's up to you, but it just is a little bit better in the room too if there isn't as many people standing. But I'll go through how the agenda is going to work today so that you'll know the item that you might be here for when it's roughly going to be considered, because we have two items with quite a few deputations today, which mean they take a couple of hours. And unusually today, the committee members will know we have an item that is being dealt with that the law requires us to deal with at 10 o'clock precisely, because there's been a public notice given of it, so we have to deal with it. It'll be very brief, but we have to deal with it at that time. So may I begin by just saying we do have quorum, and I will call to order the 7th meeting of the Executive Committee. We acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We're delighted with all the people that are here in person today, but we also remind those elsewhere, or even people here, that you can watch us on YouTube at Toronto City Council Live, or follow the meeting on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. And I will remind you there is an overflow room at Committee Room 2 where you'll see the proceedings carried live there. The first thing we have to do here is ask if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. If so, please indicate the item number and the nature of the interest. Now, did I see, far from me, but did I see there's a library capital budget variance item, am I not mistaken? And you almost always,
Yes, no,
you're okay with that one?
we've cleared up some of the, those areas, so I think.
Perfect,
think
great.
we're
I
good.
just
Yeah,
so
no,
used
thank-
to you being
Thank you for the
abundantly
reminder, yes,
cautious
for
that I.
my first 8 years here, that was necessary, but now it's not.
All good things come to an end. Very good. If there are no declarations, then I'll move forward and ask for a motion to confirm the minutes of the Executive Committee meeting on June the 6th, 2019. Councillor Ainsley, all those in favour, opposed, carried. We do have a statutory hearing scheduled at 10 o'clock this morning to consider item 7.13, which responds to a complaint filed pursuant to the Development Charges Act and the Education Act. Anyone present, and this is important to note here because of the fact this is a statutorily required time of this item, anyone present who wishes to speak, including the complainant, may address the committee on this item. So far, we don't have any notice, I believe, Madam Clerk. We do have one? Yes. Okay, so that will be dealt with precisely at 10 o'clock. What we will do, ladies and gentlemen, just so you know, in the meantime, is we will run down the agenda, which means we go through it and determine the items that will be either held for deputations or otherwise debated by committee members who wish to hold these items. We will approve the balance of the items. And then, just so that you know, because there's a large number of people in here on two items in particular, we will then deal with items as follows. We'll deal first with this item 7.13, which is the development charges item that has the one person here. We would next then deal with item 7.5, which is the Don Mills recreation item. And we will then deal with item 7.1, which is the tenants first Toronto Community Housing item. And I think between those two items, 7.5 and 7.1, we have the bulk of the people who want to be heard, which is terrific, but it just means that we don't have to then have you waiting for long parts of the day to be heard from. Just in terms of people maybe wanting to go off to the overflow room, it would be my expectation that the Don Mills item will take a good part of the morning by the time we hear from the people and have some questions of staff. Maybe not all morning, but it will take a good part of the morning. So that's just for the information of those who are here on tenants first. That will come up right afterwards, and we'll probably get started before lunch on that, and it will carry on after lunch. So I would like to add an item of new business to our agenda, if I may, and the proposed item is entitled Establishing a Subcommittee to Provide Direction to the City's Bargaining Teams on Collective Bargaining with QP Local 79 and TCEU Local 416. And I understand that the item has been pre-circulated. I think it's on pink paper. Just to provide a bit of background, in the transition to the new council, when we had to restructure all the committees, we just didn't appoint a subcommittee that is a standard subcommittee we would have of this committee to handle negotiations that will start in this calendar year, and so we're just simply putting that committee in place now, and we'll deal with it at the appropriate time. But for the moment, I'll move that it be added to the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. That now gives us 31 items on the agenda, and so we'll proceed with your concurrence with the rundown of the agenda. And we'll keep an eye on the clock for 10 o'clock. Item 7.1, implementing tenants first, is being held for deputations. Item 7.2, protecting the viability of street festivals, response to a member's motion 5.17. Now, you understand, Deputy Mayor, you're going to hold that for a motion?
Yeah.
All right?
And Mayor, if I could ask that people from the BIA office and the film office be present when we discuss, I have some questions for them.
All right, so we want the people from the BAA office and the film office requested to be in attendance for some questions of staff at that time. Item 7.3, the Crescent Town Pedestrian Bridge Review is being held for a deputation. Item 7.4, office optimization, office swing space. All right, may I have a motion to accept? Is there somebody holding that? To accept the staff recommendation? So moved by Councillor Ainsley. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 7.5 is being held for deputations. Item 7.6, Build Toronto Annual General Meeting and 2018 Audited Financial Statements. Is there a motion to receive, is that what the recommendation is, to treat this as their annual meeting, receive the build report, and direct the city clerk to forward a copy? So that's moved by Councillor Pasternak. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 7.7, EX 7.7, Casa Loma Corporation Annual General Meeting and 2018 Audited Financial Statements.
Hold that, please.
Held by Councillor Thompson. Item EX 7.8, Lakeshore Arena Corporation Annual General Meeting and 2018 Audited Financial Statements.
Be happy to move it.
Moved by Councillor Pasternak. All those in favor? Did I hear somebody wanting to hold that? Oh, moved it. Okay, moved by Councillor Pasternak. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I'll give a small editorial comment there and say things are looking up there in terms of the general thing, but we're not quite out of the woods yet, but they're getting there. Item EX 7.9, Toronto Community Housing Corporation Annual General Meeting and 2018 Audited Consolidated Financial Statements. Again, it's the same general motion of receiving and reappointing auditors and whatnot. It's a standard business moved by Councillor Ainsley. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.10, Toronto Hydro Corporation, same thing, annual general meeting and 2018 audited financial statements. Moved by Deputy Mayor Min Wong. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.11, Toronto Pan Am Sports Centre Inc., annual general meeting and 2018 audited financial statements. Moved by Councillor Ainsley. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.12, Toronto Portlands Company Annual General Meeting and 2018 Audited Financial Statements. Is there a mover of the staff recommendations here? And that's moved by Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.13 is the statutory item we'll be dealing with in a few minutes at 10 o'clock. Development charge complaint. Item EX 7.14, capital variance report for the year ended December 31st, 2018. Moved by the Budget Chief, Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.15, the operating variance report for the year ended December 31st, 2018. Again, moved by the Budget Chief, Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.16, the Reserve and Reserve Fund Balances Report as of December 31st, 2018, moved by Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we get into the capital variance and other variance reports for the first 4 months. EX 7.17, the capital variance report for the 4 months ended April 30th, 2019. Again, moved by the Budget Chief, Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.18, the operating variance report for the 4 months ended April 30th, 2019. Moved by Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.19, Invest Toronto final wind-up and dissolution. This is just being received for information on the wind-up of Invest Toronto. Is moved by Deputy Mayor Min Wong. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.20, the 2019 levy on rail, roadways, and rights-of-ways and power utility and distribution corridors.
Hold that, please.
Hold that. Are you going to move? I hope you're going to move a motion again, yet again, calling on the appropriate authorities to allow us to change that levy. Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. That's being held then. Item EX 7.21, fees for solicitor services, limiting distance agreements provided by the city solicitor to outside parties. And is somebody moving the staff recommendations from the city solicitor? Councillor Ainsley. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.22, retention schedule for accountability records in the Office of the Integrity Commissioner. There is a I have it here somewhere. You have it there? There's a motion that I will move, and it's again housekeeping, and it simply provides for the accountability officer to recommend directly to council the establishment of a retention schedule for an accountability record, and it deletes a section. So that's it's up in front of you. It's really just housekeeping, and that's all that this was going to deal with, was to do that. Moved by myself. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And that's on the amendment. And then on the item as amended, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. That covers 22A as well. Item EX 7.23, Children's Services Amendments to the 2019 approved capital budget, cash flows for Mount Dennis Child Care and St. Barnabas Catholic School Child Care Center projects. We have a staff recommendation. Somebody willing to move the staff recommendation?
I'll move it.
Councillor Annunziata. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.24, Emergency Management Program funding increase from Ontario Power Generation Incorporated. Again, I think this is fairly straightforward. Is there someone willing to move the recommendation from the Fire Chief and General Manager of Fire Services? Councillor Thompson. Deputy Mayor Thompson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.25, Toronto Public Library 2019 capital budget and 2028 capital plan accelerations and deferrals is being held for a deputation. Item EX 7.26, Toronto Water 2019 capital budget and 2028 capital plan adjustments. There's a staff recommendation moved by Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.27, Transportation Services 2019 capital budget and 2019 to 2028 adjustments. Moved by Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 7.28, transfer of reserve funds to Toronto Live Foundation. There's a recommendation here coming from the Board of Directors of TO Live. Councillor Crawford.
I have a somewhat a technical amendment.
Has it been distributed?
It hasn't.
It has
Well,
not.
I'll just hold it. We'll distribute it.
All right, why don't we just distribute it and we can deal with it quickly later. People can at least have a chance to read it because it is fairly long, and so we'll just put that on hold for Councillor Crawford to move a motion. Item EX 7.29, this is a letter coming from the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee. Can I have a motion accepting the request that we're asked to make on behalf of that committee from the Deputy Mayor, Denzelman and Wong? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then we have EX 7.30, the Toronto Public Library e-content campaign is being held for a deputation. And then last but not least, we have the item that I amended, which that I added, or you did, by way of the new business, which is the establishment of the subcommittee. I'm happy to leave that for people to read it, or we can just proceed ahead to actually establish that committee, which is something that is on the back. It has the recommendation of the 4 members, Deputy Mayor and Wong as chair, Deputy Mayor Bailau, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Crawford. The Deputy Mayor moves that. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. What time is it, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I'm sorry. I hear a
Mayor.
voice. Is that Councillor Nunziata? Is that you? Yes.
Yes.
Put my glasses back
If
on.
I can, please, on EX 7.4, which we approved, if I can reopen that item, I have questions on that item.
So this is the office optimization office swing space?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, all in favor then of reopening that item and having it held for questions for Councillor Nunziata? In favor, opposed, carried. All right, that's done. So. Yes, I would have a motion if the committee is concurrent that I would move that with the exception of item 7.13, which is the statutory item, speakers who have not pre-registered to be allowed to register to speak until 10 a.m. on June 2nd, 2019, after which no further registration will be allowed and the speakers list would be closed. We have about 30 some odd deputations on the list. What did I say? July 4th. June 6th, July 6th, July 4th. Right, you're right, it's July 4th, 2019. Good catch there, Councillor Deputy Mayor Dobson. So we would have the list closed at 10 a.m. on July 4th, 2019, after which no registration would be allowed and the speakers list would be closed. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. I've just amended that by hand like an initial. So we have 3 minutes. We do have to wait until 10 o'clock sharp, and we'll just wait those 3 minutes, and then we'll start item 7.13. Now, do I?
Science Center. The Ontario Science Center. They did something related to space. It was fantastic. Actually.
Really?
They had all these.
Cruise.
I'd never been on one of the cruises.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, may I just say, Again, over on the right-hand side of the room here, there's a little bit of general hubbub. Ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Yeah, I will. Could I just ask that we, thank you. First of all, can I just say, that we tried to take into account numbers of deputations and numbers of people in the room in order to schedule the items the way we did, and somebody has to come first and somebody has to come second, and I know there's some people who, I'm pretty liberal about making dispensations for people who absolutely have to catch a Wheel-Trans or something like that to make sure they get heard, but we just have to do things in a certain way, and we're trying to sort of take account of the number of people in the room who could otherwise go, but somebody has to go second and third and fourth, and I apologize for those who would rather be first and who aren't, but it's just the way we have to deal with these things as best we can. So as it is now after 10 a.m., we will consider the timed item that is timed by statutory requirement. It is EX 7.13, Development Charge Complaint, 1383, 1385, 1389, 1399, and 1403, Military Trail. This is a statutory public meeting in accordance with the Development Charges Act and the Education Act. We have one registered speaker on this item. If anybody else wishes to speak, please register with the clerk seated to my right immediately, because we will deal with the item, otherwise in fairly rapid order. But if there's anybody else beyond the one person that is registered, please come up and let the clerk know right here to my right away. Susan Rosenthal is the one person who is registered to speak. Ms. Rosenthal, you're most welcome. And you have 5 minutes.
Be much more than 5 minutes, but it may be just a tad more.
Okay, well, we have to be fair about how we deal with the rules, and so I do allow a little bit of indulgence, but it can't be all that much, because then everybody else will seek the same. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. My client, as you know, is seeking a credit to the development charges it paid when it received a permit for the construction of 12 new buildings, which replaced 5 existing dwellings on the site, which were demolished very shortly before the new buildings were constructed. The amount of the credit amounts to approximately $200,000 in respect of the city development charges and approximately $7,500 in respect of the education development charges. As you know, the city has provisions in its bylaw to allow for the reduction of development charges payable to take into account the fact that the development is replacing development that has been demolished, existing units. And the city does have a time limit within which these provisions apply. And in my view, the purpose of that time limit is threefold. Firstly, the city wants to make sure that buildings aren't demolished and the site lays vacant for a great length of time. Secondly, the city wants to ensure that the purpose for the demolition is related to the purpose for the new construction, so that buildings are being replaced, not just being demolished and many years later new construction comes along. And finally, in my view, the city wants to encourage active processing of applications to ensure that, again, there's not a time lag. They want to make sure there's not inactivity. And in my client's case, there was no inactivity at all. In fact, it was just the opposite. The permit was issued to a previous owner, and that previous owner, shortly after receiving the demolition permit, applied for a zoning bylaw and received a zoning bylaw amendment, then applied for consents to sever the lands to facilitate a sale of them. It was sold to my client in September of 2015, and very shortly after my client purchased the property, they entered into a design exercise which resulted in the need for a minor variance application, which they submitted on November 18, 2015. They wanted to make sure that there was sufficient time to process the minor variance application, and so they applied in January 2016 for a transfer of the demolition permit to them. And when they applied for that transfer, they in fact had to fill out a new application for a demolition permit. It wasn't merely a administrative exercise. They actually had to fill out forms seeking that. And it was my client's view that when it did that, it was in effect seeking a new issuance of a demolition permit. My client actively processed its variance application, but as you know, these things take time, and I suspect that's why the city in its newest development charge bylaw has extended the time between the demolition permit and the application for a building permit to 60 months. It's nobody's fault. These things just take time. And as a result, my client requested extensions of the demolition permit twice to allow for the processing of the application. And the city was well aware that the reason for the extensions was so that my client could continue and maintain its minor variance application. Once my client's application was issued, minor variance approval was issued in August of 2016, it immediately proceeded to pursue its development proposal. It commenced demolition in December 2016, and it applied for a building permit in June 2017. That was just 17 and a half months after it received the transfer of the demolition permit to it. And in fact, it began, the permit was issued on August 16, 2017, just 19 and a half months after the permit was issued to it. By waiting to demolish the buildings until they were ready to proceed to development, my client fulfilled what we believe is the intent behind the ability to obtain credits. They ensured that the site didn't sit vacant while the approvals were underway. They ensured that there was a relationship between the buildings that were being demolished and the new buildings being put up. And they ensured that the redevelopment application on the site was actively pursued. In our opinion, the transfer is the critical date. The transfer of that permit is the date upon which the time begins to run. And we meet the time frame from the date of the transfer. I note that the 36 months that is in the bylaw, in effect, would have expired essentially when my client sought the transfer. And so it makes no sense that my client would have taken a position that the demolition permit was expired and they had no benefit of the credit. Had my client understood at the time that the city would be taking the position that the credit timing began from the date of the original issuance of the permit in 2013 and not from the date when they were given the permit in 2016, they would have asked for the revocation of that permit and they would have resubmitted a new demolition permit. It would have been a lot less costly to them and certainly wouldn't have resulted in the dispute that we now have with the city.
Okay, so I've given you 1 extra minute, and I would ask you now just to wrap up because I think that's fair.
I am nearly done.
Great.
Thank you, sir. That wasn't their understanding, and they understood that the permit, in fact, that the time would begin from January 2016, particularly since the city knew that the purpose for the demolition permit and the purpose for the extension was to facilitate the proposed redevelopment of these lands. And as a result, I am seeking on behalf of my client a reduction to both the city development charges and to the education development charges. And I would be prepared to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. The question is, are there questions of the deputant? We'll just ask first if there's any members of the council that are visiting our committee. I don't see any hands up, so that would go to Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Tory. How much of a reduction in the fees is your client looking for?
For the city fees, it is $200,000, if you'll bear with me for just a second, $200,335, and for the education development charges, $7,465.
Okay, and your client's looking for those reductions because you're saying the gap was caused by the city that caused them to go back and get a new demolition permit and the other related paperwork.
In our view, the seeking of the transfer and the need to file a new application for that permit triggered the date. But the timing was as a result of the need to process the application through the city, yes.
Okay, and your client wasn't aware that this had to be done before they bought the properties?
I'm not sure.
They didn't understand the timelines when they bought the properties and demolished the houses and then started the construction.
They didn't demolish the properties until after they received their minor variance approval, and their understanding was that the timing began from when they were given the demolition permit rather than when their previous owner was given the demolition permit.
Okay. And I guess the site plan application that was done by the previous owner?
The current owner, the previous owner got a rezoning and consent. The current owner, when it looked at the proposal, decided it needed to do some tweaks. As a result of those tweaks, a minor variance application had to be made.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Tory.
Councillor Ainsley. Any further questions of the deputant? All right, Ms. Rosenthal, well, thank you very much for your comments and answers to the questions. And we'll now move to questions of staff. Oh, yes, I'll ask again. I asked earlier on, is there anybody else who wishes to speak to this matter? Are you wishing to speak to this matter, sir? No. Okay, anybody else? I'll just ask anybody else wanting to speak to this matter. Okay, on that basis, then we will move to questions of staff. Are there members of council that are visiting with us that want to ask a question of staff? If not, we can move to Councillor Ainsley.
Okay. I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see there, Councillor.
Very
Go ahead.
briefly, just a quick question to staff through you, Mr. Mayor. On page 5 of the report, it references complete building permit applications were submitted on June the 21st, 2017. Building permit applications are received and submitted, or when they're issued?
Through the chair, the calculation is based on the application of the demolition permit. Issuance of demolition permit and application of building permit. So it's that difference in time.
Oh, if someone waits 6 months for their building permit, that 6 months is part of the calculation.
If they waited 6 months for the permit to be approved, is that, I'm sorry.
Your report says that the calculation of the 3 years starts on the date that the applications are submitted, not when it's issued. Is that?
Correct. That's correct.
So if someone waits, I don't know, 3, 4, 6 months for the permit applications, that period of time counts in the calculation, that wait period?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ainsley.
So I'm just trying to understand, when they went to get their building permit, were they already past the 36-month period?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Councillor?
When the applicant went to get their building permit, were they already past the 36-month period?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and how do we communicate back and forth? Is there any communication back and forth during that 36 period? Like telling them, you know, get your paperwork in, this is what's going to happen?
Certainly, through the chair. There was some communication because the building permit, or the demolition permits, are essentially expire or would be revoked after a period of time, typically about a year. So there was communication, and those demolition permits were extended. But staff do not advise the applicant on how to minimize the development charges. So there's no notice that their demolition reduction period is set to expire.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mayor Tory.
Thank you. Are there other questions of staff? Can I just ask you, just because I think for those who are watching, and it's an important part of that people understand what's going on here, the report sets it out, but it's sort of been alluded to in the questions of my two colleagues, but could you give us the sort of 30-second, the staff is recommending here that we stick with the decision that was taken, the bylaw was properly applied. Could you give us when I say 30 seconds, the short explanation as to why you believe that was the case? I think you were sort of going around it in just the answers to the last two questions, just so that that's on the record for people who are watching.
Absolutely, through the chair. So this situation is a case where the amount of, or the application of the bylaw is disputed by the applicant. They have a statutory right to be heard by executive committee. In this case, as the staff report indicates, staff reviewed the file and determined that we had followed the bylaw appropriately. And so our recommendation is that the request be dismissed. There's really no dispute about the facts of the matter. I believe in this situation, as the deputant stated, there may have been a misunderstanding about when their timeline ran out, but staff have reviewed the facts, and it was clearly beyond the 36 months, and we have a duty as staff to uphold the bylaw, enforce it, and recommend it in accordance with the bylaw, and our finding was there was no error in how it was applied.
So what you are saying, in effect, then, is the law as written, you've examined that, you've examined this file relative to that, and that you found that the law in this case was followed.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Those are my questions. Are there any other questions of staff? All right. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this matter? All right. We have in front of us a staff recommendation, which is that it will go forward to City Council, but that it's determined that the bylaw and education development charges bylaw have been properly applied to this development, and that City Council dismiss the complaint filed pursuant to Section 20 of the Development Charges Act and the Education Act. This will go forward to City Council, but I'll call the question on that staff recommendation. Is it moved by someone here? Moved by Councillor Ainsley. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Rosenthal. All right. Now, I'm going to just exercise the discretion that I've alluded to before. There are 4 people, I understand, that have indicated they have Wheel-Trans reservations and so forth on the item that is 7.1. And for those 4 people, we will hear from them now with respect to their deputations on 7.1, which is the tenants first item, because I know sometimes these Wheel-Trans reservations can be hard to change. So I would ask that, I'll just read their names because they're coming out of order on the list here. Kathy Birch, William Lohman, Doris Power, and Anita Dressler. We will hear those 4 people and ask questions of them, and then we will revert back to item 7.5 at that time and start on the list there. So, Ms. Birch, you are first, and you're most welcome here. And if is that table set up in a way that it's okay for you?
Yeah.
Very good. All right, you are welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Tory and committee members. My name's Kathy Birch. I'm the founder and the chair of the RPath, Responsible Personal Accessibility in Toronto Housing Committee, which was created in 2013. We are tenants living in Toronto community housing who live with physical disabilities who advocate for accessibility and partner with Toronto community housing to ensure quality, safe, cost-effective, and usable accessibility for Toronto community housing tenants. We provide the lived experience lens to help TCHC spend money effectively to create usable spaces for all tenants, including tenants with disabilities. Together with management and staff, we've helped build a robust accessibility program that includes policy and procedure development, budget recommendations, a 10-year accessibility plan, recommendations for modifications to existing builds in common spaces and in-suite, a build ratio for accessible units for our development team in revitalized and new communities, and accessibility build standards for all TCHC properties. We've worked extensively with TCHC facilities management and development in the past 6 years by helping scope projects, reviewing drawings, and develop accessibility build standards that exceed the Ontario Building Code, as the current OBC is insufficient for mobility devices used today. These standards mean TCHC meets duty to accommodate legislation, which is really important. And from this room and the difficulties we've had, we need to talk. And allows tenants to age in place safer and longer. We review drawings and go on site for all revitalization projects with development so we continue to provide for future needs. Our work with development and facilities provide proactive and innovative build standards so new and revitalized communities are delivered with truly usable accessibility, not just visitable. as well as modification to existing builds. This is important because we have an aging population. Tenants' needs will rise. We've worked with and made recommendations to TCHC management for build ratios of fully accessible units in revitalized and new communities to meet the current and future needs of that aging population. These recommendations have been supported and committed to by the TCHC Board of Directors. Because the work for usable accessibility has been extensive for 6 years in TCHC, the progress is remarkable. It's not desirable or in the best interest of current or future tenants to move development to the city or to create HTO. It would impede accessibility for persons with disabilities being able to function in revitalized and new communities currently being worked on and future projects. The only option to circumvent this critical barrier would be for the city to honor the current TCHC Board of Directors commitment of accessible unit build ratio and the delivery of accessible units in new and revitalized communities with the TCHC accessibility build standards to meet current and future needs for accessible housing. And I've given you the actual minutes from the board meeting. For the adoption of the TCHC accessibility build standards with the move of development for residential common spaces and accessible units. And we request that development continue to partner with RPath on residential accessibility at our monthly meetings if moved under the city of the umbrella of the city. So they can continue to update RPath monthly on TCHC projects and continue their value input on innovative accessibility build standards for accessible housing. If these steps are not taken with any movement of the TCHC Development Division, new and revitalized communities would be built to OBC standards and not meet accommodation requirements for TCHC tenants. This would then result in large capital investment requirements to the very same communities. We're also here out of serious concern for our seniors' portfolio, continued accessibility delivery. We're pleased to know from the tenant's first report that TCHC will maintain ownership and responsible for capital repairs of the seniors' building because accessibility is then included for common spaces and unit modifications as part of the TCHC capital budget. If the new seniors entity will have their own capital budget that will only be delivered by TCHC, then it is a must that accessibility for common spaces and unit modification be a requirement of that new budget. This is a significant capital investment.
I'll have to ask you to wrap up very shortly, Ms. Birch. Thank you.
Okay. We need you to accept our build standards to make sure that these units get modified. And we also need you to make sure that they have process in this new entity to make sure that the tenants, currently they've got a process, they've got standards that meet their needs. If you're going to take the seniors portfolio away and give it a separate entity, you have to make sure that they have those same kind of processes in place and available to the tenants and equal opportunity.
All right. On that note, I'll thank you, and maybe I'll just ask the first question, because I think that I was just coming to really what I think was the nub of your whole presentation, both with respect to the movement of the development wing of TCHC and also with respect to the establishment of the seniors entity, that what you're saying, I think, is that you want to be absolutely assured that, and by the way, I should say I thank you for the work I know you do across the whole portfolio of TCHC and our revitalized communities that we're working on and so forth. I know you've been a big contributor to that with your colleagues, but what you're really saying is you want to make sure that the progress that you acknowledge that has been made in terms of adopting standards and enforcing those, as it were, with respect to accommodation, and those positive initiatives are carried forward so that regardless of who is doing the development, that the same standards are maintained, and the same with the seniors, that those things are firmly entrenched, as it were, in any new structure that would be contemplated by this report. Is that a fair?
It absolutely is. We need to make sure that our properties are going and our tenants are going to be accommodated with the same quality that they're currently giving. We want to make sure that the process, that they're not losing time for even for making their application. We want to make sure they get equal opportunity to what they have now. The idea is to make things better. It's not to step backwards.
All right. That's the only question I had, just to make that clear, which you certainly did. Are there other members of the committee or visiting members of council wishing to ask Ms. Birch questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for your submission. I know we're going to hear from others, but we appreciate that, and we do appreciate your continued activism on this in this area. Next, we would have, in order of the people on the list who'd asked, we heard William Lohman. Where's Mr. Lohman? Mr. Lohman here? Not over. Oh, there you are, Mr. Lohman. Can you? Okay, we'll just clear a little spot there for you to come forward.
It's a little tough in this room.
No, I understand. It's not set up. We've improved the desk.
We got a convoy going.
We've improved the desk. Good morning, Mr. Lohman. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes, and you're welcome here this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, and good morning to members of the Executive Committee. My name is Bill Lohman. I'm a tenant in Toronto Housing. I'm also a member of SAIC, which is a Seniors Advisory and Advocacy Council, which previously was Seniors Voice, an advocacy group that speaks with and represents seniors. Please understand this morning, my words are not meant as an attack on staff or the positive results from the youth programs. Staff are doing what they've always done. And if you want a different outcome, then you need to change the mindset and the method to your approach, or you will continue to get what you've always got. Successful problem solving requires finding the right solution to the right problem. And we fail more often because we solve the wrong problem than because we come up with the wrong solution to the right problem. During his remarks to this body on January 26, 2016, Senator Eggleton stated at the conclusion of his task force report to you, Mr. Mayor, he spoke about developing a customer service culture to serve the residents better and give tenants a stronger voice in the governance system. I failed to see an appreciation for his sentiments in this secretive machinations of Tenants First that seem to crop up every year when the snow melts with each year's ask of council and offering tenants little time to parse these proposed changes. They've manipulated and codified procedures of democracy so that they could appoint our tenant directors. And this is just one perceived example of the disdain that tenants, particularly seniors, have received throughout the unfolding of this Tenants First process. Housing, the Citywide Refresh Subcommittee, in conjunction with and at the direction of Tenants First city staff, coordinated a facade claiming that tenants are providing input and consent, while new policies, procedures, and programs have been quietly developed behind closed doors that are being imposed on tenants and will be in full force once the other shoe drops, which is your approval of 7.1. The commingling and collusion, which was joyfully evident at the city's and housing staff's camaraderie during these recent information sessions. To me, there were more than a dozen and a half staff from the city and from housing who were present to mollify the concerns of the tenants with responses like, "We'll address that later." We haven't gotten to that part yet. We'll be sure to seek tenant input when the time comes. We consulted extensively, and this is what tenants asked for. I am sure that when tenant leaders responded positively when they were asked if some organizational and human resource training would benefit them in their community endeavors, they had no idea and were not informed that this training fund for both tenants and staff would be appropriated by taking 30% of the meager $467 that tenants receive annually for use for their community and tenant activities. The tenant charter was disavowed by staff and tossed into a closet for 2 years and is now being brought out and used as a cudgel to hold tenants accountable for identifying and fixing their own community issues through a newly imposed community action plan. Staff are no longer coordinators, as if they ever were for seniors. They are now the administrators of the community action plan's goals that conscripted tenants are expected to accomplish for their communities. Their new role for tenants is to ensure that they are working on delivering quality homes, creating vibrant communities, and striving for service excellence. And they won't be eligible for any type of funding from this new interim funding table unless it is specifically in line with the agenda.
I'll have to ask you to conclude now, if you would.
Thank you very much. So basically, the Tenants First plan is a paradigm for seniors last. Youth, over the years, have been receiving funding sources, recreation, job opportunities, scholarships, while seniors are now being told that they can put in applications for paints and brushes so that they can deliver quality homes and vibrant communities. There's a problem here. And the problem actually is it's a disconnect. People are looking at the same word and having two different interpretations.
All right.
What needs to happen
stop
is
you right there.
people need to speak together.
All right. And we thank you very much for those comments. Are there questions of this deputy? I don't hear any, Mr. Loman, so I'll thank you very much for your deputation. I appreciate that. Doris Power. Doris Power, I beg your pardon? Move down the list. All right, all right. Anita Dressler. Ms. Dressler? Anita Dressler? Here? Okay, there we are.
Also to get a chair. Oh, sorry. We need one other. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Good morning. You have 5 minutes.
All right.
Are you both going to speak during that 5
Will be
minutes?
less.
All right. Please go ahead. Thank you.
All right,
You're welcome.
fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor Tory, councillors, staff, and those in attendance. I respectfully submit to you my deputation. I'm a seniors advocate and the chair of SAKE, Senior Advisory and Advocacy Council. Valentina Mahoney, our secretary, is also with me. The separation into a new entity is paramount in the success of a senior unit. In the past, everything from assistance and engagement has been focused on youth. The word senior has been a dirty word. There is a perception that once we are a senior, our worth has been diminished and that we are a drain on the economy. Not so. Seniors of today are vibrant, independent, intelligent, educated, experienced, and are your largest source of volunteer action. We contribute hundreds of thousands of hours of volunteering. We keep your costs down. We paid our way in the past, most of us working 40-plus hours a week for 40 or 50 years, and are still contributing to our city and to our buildings within TCHC. Most of us agree with this action plan, however, in its infancy, we are focused on the changes that will impact on the approximately 28,000 seniors living in TCHC, 14,000 living in the now 83 senior buildings across your city. It is imperative that we are actually part of the new governance and our voices are heard. Staff whose intentions are good but are living in a different life cycle cannot possibly recognize that seniors are a different breed. We know how to be engaged. We are experts at managing how to resolve issues. Please do not dumb us down. Yes, some of us need vital supports in home care. Some of us would be recognized for who we are and what we contribute, which is very rarely done. This plan still has a lot of unanswered questions, mostly about governance and essential answers to our well-being. Examples. 1, will we have a commissioner of equity to work with us if a life crisis occurs and we fall behind in our rent? Presently, OACH works with our tenants to ensure that evictions for rent arrears is kept to a minimum, and eviction is the last resort. 2, will the same site staff remain in our buildings? 3, will we be offered a choice in the programs and services that we receive? 4, will we have input, and will our input be implemented in the proposed plans that will affect our lives? 5, will the city stop dropping streets to homes and CAMH persons into our senior buildings, making our buildings vulnerable due to antisocial behavior? 6, will this model consider transitional housing to assist persons mentioned in 5 to learn life skills, to live independently before being moved into our senior buildings and making them vulnerable? 7, will supportive housing with agencies supporting the above individuals 24/7 be fitted into your new model? 8, will your new model ensure quiet enjoyment of our tenancies as per our leases? And 9, the biggest question of all, will there be transparency, accountability, respect, equity, and equality? I want to thank everyone here for allowing me to depute on this matter.
And is your colleague going to speak as well, or are you just now
No.
willing to take questions?
I will.
You've said what's to be said in the formal remarks? It's fine. I just wanted to make sure you have a little bit of time left. Okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Could I just start with a question then? Again, you understand the purpose behind this is actually to fulfill a lot of what you spoke about, which is to make sure that we're not sort of trying to hive off or push off seniors to some unknown place, but rather to put them or have them in a structural unit within the context of our social housing programs that allows us to, with the other governments, quite frankly, to deliver whatever services people need in a more effective manner than it would be the case if we didn't have separate seniors buildings. So you understand, and I would think would support that.
Mayor Tory, I respect what you are saying. However, how it is being proposed to us and what we are seeing and the consultations by Tenants First, that is not what the message is to us.
Okay.
There is total perception that there will be a control issue, and we are too stupid to manage our own affairs.
Yeah, I can't imagine that any of the staff people I've met with or any of the people involved with this would ever
Well,
convey.
that is the perception that's
I understand
coming across at
perception
all
can
the
be reality.
consultations.
May I ask you this? The questions that you put, which I took some note of, and we might ask the staff when it comes time for that later on. Unfortunately, you may be gone because you've wanted to catch your ride. But if some of those questions were answered about the applicability of the equity commissioner's work, staff in the buildings, seniors' input on the plans, if those questions were satisfactorily answered, would that change your view so that you wouldn't have this perception that we're trying to do something that I would say we aren't trying to do, or we?
I would agree. The only problem is, so far, those questions have been asked numerous times. And the answer we always get is, we will get back to you, and nobody gets back to us.
Well, that's why we have these deputations, so that you can come here and tell us directly that you're not satisfied. So I've certainly taken note of those questions you
Yes, sir.
posed, and we will take those up with the staff.
Thank you.
But I just want you to know, from my perspective, and we'll move to questions from others, that, you know, there is absolutely not a scintilla of thought that somehow we undervalue the contributions seniors have made over their lives, or even today, and that the idea here is to try and do better by those and for those seniors, and be able to provide the kinds of wraparound services that in some cases some need, more so than others, more effectively, as opposed to any other motive. The whole motive here is actually very pure and positive, and we'll need the support of the other governments. So you understand that's what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do.
Okay. Well, so Councillor Carroll had her hand up, and then Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're kind of rushing you with the 3-minute
That's all
limit,
right.
but I wonder if I could go back to what you said about CAMH clients. You're not saying that they couldn't be in these
No,
residences?
what,
just that they
what
need
I'm saying that
supports?
they should have 24/7 support.
Right.
Unfortunately, most CAMH are streets to homes that have a caseworker. Caseworker comes in for a half an hour every week or every 2 weeks. These people escalate at night, on weekends, on holidays, not when staff is available.
Right.
What we're saying is teaching life skills, very similar to the penitentiary system with halfway houses. I'm not saying they shouldn't have a home. I'm saying that it has to be done smarter.
Right. So you just want them to have wraparound supports?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Fletcher.
And I guess the same would go if there are streets to homes clients coming in. They need to have a lot more attention than
Yes, they
currently is
do.
being paid.
Unfortunately, some of our buildings, streets to homes or CAMH patients, have moved into our buildings and the whole building has become terrorized. I'm saying that they have to be taught life skills. They haven't been involved in the actual day-to-day living of living independently. And I think it's very important that supportive housing or transitional housing be implemented by the city.
So you'd like to see supportive housing and transitional housing or focus on that?
Yes. And the supportive housing be run by agencies that
Absolutely.
are their clients.
Correct. So this idea, this, as far as I'm concerned, I'm sorry to hear about your any interactions that may have led you to think that this isn't to increase the focus on seniors. And that is my understanding. That's my intention when I've looked at this. And for that, it would be to increase the focus on seniors as a standalone unit.
Right.
And to make sure things improve rather than not get worse, but some of the situations that you've described, I understand.
I think that's
well.
all of our deputations are
You're
relating
saying,
to that.
don't make a change that would make things worse. Make
That's
a
right.
change to make
Correct.
things better. That's
Betterment.
basically what you're saying.
Yes.
And you're concerned about the OACH, if this moves over, that there would be no more OACH. So how
Yes.
the person who's charged with ensuring that nobody is evicted because they didn't fill out papers and all of those kinds of
That's
things.
correct.
That person would travel
That's
with
correct.
this unit.
I think it's very important for OACH to be involved in the senior unit because seniors are vulnerable. And let's face it, with aging, they forget the documents, they forget
Yes.
to get the proper documents, and to be evicted for rent arrears because of it, or even seniors that have transferred from ODSP into the CPP, where there's a large settlement given, the money is spent, and then the senior is way behind in arrears. OACH can step in, and they can make a repayment plan to save the tenant their tenancy.
And just to be clear, it's not exactly on this, but there's some feeling in some quarters that we don't really need OACH, or that you would very strongly advise that this person who's dedicated to seniors and their frailty and making sure they're not evicted should be maintained. As
I think OACH is the imperative section for all of Toronto housing, especially the senior unit. I think that they are very effective, and I think they've reduced the number of evictions within the system.
You know they're not allowed to deal with non-seniors.
I beg your pardon?
She is not allowed to deal with non-seniors. Are you aware of that?
I think it should be expanded personally
Okay,
to
thank
all tenants of
I appreciate you
TCHC.
telling me that because I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Are there other visiting councillors or members of the committee who wish to ask questions of this deputy? Okay, seeing none, I will thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Deputation, thank you. Then, are we going to go back then? I guess Doris Power has been moved down and will not be heard from now. Will be heard from later on when we come back to this item. Is that right? Yep. Okay, so that's fine then. That completes the deputations we're going to hear at this time on this item. And we will then revert, as we had previously announced, to beginning item 7.5, the Don Mills Planning and Recreation Facilities for the Don Mills communities. And we have deputants on this. There's 10. And so we will hear first from Adil Patel, Friends of Flemington Park. I beg your pardon? Staff for? Oh, yes, the Deputy Mayor is quite right. There was a very brief presentation from the staff about the item so that with all the people here, everybody would know what we're talking about, those who are more familiar with it than others. So I would ask that the staff come and make that short presentation, and then we'll have Mr. Patel. Sorry about that.
John, you maybe just sit there. There won't be questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to introduce the brief presentation that we're going to do, Anne-Marie Nazar, just to introduce the project team on this, Anne-Marie Nazar, who's our Director of Parks Planning and Capital Projects, John Andrewski from City Planning, who's the Manager of Community Planning, and Howie Dayton. And Anne-Marie is going to take us through the short presentation.
Good morning. So the report before you focuses on planning recreation facilities in the Daw Mills community. When we look at the planning for these facilities, and particularly looking at it now, we've basically done a review of the demographics and also put an equity lens in terms of the population of the area currently. We've also looked at the growth, which I'll give you a snapshot of. We've looked at the new opportunities that growth has resulted in, and we've also looked at the facilities master plan, which was approved by Council in 2017, and the design best practices that we've come forward on community recreation facility planning. So all of these elements collectively have informed what you have before you in the report and our recommendations. When we look at the demographics of the corridor, so for the area that we were looking at in terms of planning community recreation facilities, we looked at an area from York Mills, the Daw Mills Road being the spine of this area, and basically south to Overlea. And as with other communities across the city, this area is very diverse in terms of its population. It has a current population of approximately 46,000 people. In the southern portion of the corridor, we have our Flemington Park community, which is a neighborhood improvement area. And currently it has the largest current population of around 22,000 people. And it has the lower income of the three areas that we've provided a profile on. When we go into the middle area between Lawrence and Eglinton and the Winford community, as it's generally referred to by us, is around 15,000 population. And the income is around 89,000. And then when we go to the north portion of the area between Lawrence and York Mills, we see that we have about 9,000 people and about 152,000 in terms of the income. So it shows that when we're planning for these facilities, we have to look at the overall demographic mix of the communities that we're planning for. Next slide. We also look at growth. This area has undergone a lot of change. And in the report, there's a reflection of an agreement that happened in 2010 as a result of the Shops of Daw Mills development. The blue dot represents the growth that was planned for this area at the Shops of Daw Mills at around 2010, which basically shows around 2,000 units of a residential development. And that was the vision at the time. We didn't anticipate the range of growth that the area was going to be experiencing. The mustard or yellow colored dots represents growth and development that has happened or planned for between 2011 and 2017, and that's around 3,600 units. And then in 2018, we saw approval of another 9,000 units of planned growth. So that's 14,000 new residential units, representing approximately 25,000 additional people that are coming into this corridor. 75% of that growth is focused at the Don Mills and Eglinton intersection. Thanks, James. As I mentioned, when you have growth, you have new opportunities. So once again, in 2010, there was a site identified for a community facility at the Shops of Don Mills, and it is approximately 1 acre in size. We recently, through the approval of the Celestica development, secured a 5.5 acre park parcel. That approval basically got LPAT approval earlier in January of this year, but was before council last spring. So basically, we had an opportunity as a result of the Celestica development to plan for recreation facilities in a different way that was not anticipated before. The Celestica site is 5 times the site of the Shops of Don Mills site. And it also basically housed the Twin Pad Arena that was that is on the Shops of Don Mills site, and we had to look for another site in the Don Mills community, and it took us quite a while to find another site that was suitable for a future Twin Pad Arena. And we had got council's approval of that in 2016. And then when we looked at planning recreation facilities now, we've looked at the opportunity that this site would have in terms of housing a multi-component community facility to serve the growing area. When we look at the two sites, I will show you in the next slide the different facilities, but just to give you a sense of the distance between the two sites, it's approximately 1 kilometer, a little less, between the two sites. Our service catchment area for recreation facilities is 2.5. It's a 2.5 kilometer catchment area. And what we are basically in the preferred facility model, looking at locating the community recreation facility to serve the entire corridor at the Celestica site, and I'll go through the components of that. But what we are also doing is recommending that the site at the Shops of Don Mills remain for public community use, as it is a land exchange for the Civitan that currently exists on the Shops of Don Mills site. The alternate proposal, which I'll get into in another site, showed us splitting up the facility into two different facilities. So we'll move on to the next slide. So the preferred facility proposal, we went out and we engaged with the community on these two proposals. And a question has often come up, well, why did you call it the preferred facility proposal? Well, when we were looking at the different alternatives, we did our full analysis, and we realized that this really is the preferred facility. It is located in a large park, allowing for the synergies between the public park and the community facility. We felt that it could probably be designed and planned for this area to truly serve the growth and change in the area and the existing community needs. The facility components that are included in the preferred facility, it's a large integrated facility. It co-locates a twin ice pad that would also be used during the off-season as a multi-sportplex. It includes community spaces, it includes a gymnasium, it includes a double tank pool that would be similar to the Pam McConnell aquatic facility, and it would basically create one integrated, seamless user experience, providing multiple opportunities for people to stay and play, allowing for longer operating hours to manage people's very precious personal time. The alternate proposal looked at basically two facilities, one at the Shops of Don Mills of about 27,000 square feet that would be a gymnasium with some multi-program spaces, purpose rooms, excuse me. And then at the Celestica site, it would have the Twin Pad Arena, the large aquatic facility with sort of a smaller number of multi-purpose rooms. And we looked at this proposal because we did distill and fully consider what was thought about in 2010 in terms of planning for this community, and seeing what alternate we could consider. And one of the concerns that we have with the alternate proposal is we're dividing up a recreation facility between two different sites. So it requires people to go to two different sites to access their facility. Also, by co-locating the gym with the pool and the multi-sportplex / ice arena, we would have staff in place to, instantly program and create synergies and opportunities for communities in that large facility. So for us, there's that seamlessness in terms of operations and that seamlessness in terms of user experience that we've heard again and again that people expect. We are often challenged by our smaller community facilities programming it and bringing people to those facilities and satisfying their needs. So that's why we felt that we had to be transparent when we went out to the public and we spoke about the preferred facility model, and that's what is recommended in the report. We did public engagement. We went out, we did 4 stakeholder meetings, we did 6 pop-ups, we did a big open house where we had 2 presentations and 525 people engaged. We found that the majority of those engaged expressed preference for the preferred facilities. One-stop shop, convenient, efficient, accessible. We took efforts to engage with youth in the area, popped up in shopping centers. Everybody gets their groceries and they have an opinion on their way in and their way out. And, but we also heard, to be fair, from the Don Mills Ratepayers Association and some of the residents at Don Mills and Lawrence that they really actually didn't like either option. They preferred the facility that was planned, and they were part of planning in 2010. And so that was part of the, so we had a bit of a geographic kind of response, which is not unusual in any type of exercise that we engage in. But we did hear a lot of positive feedback on the preferred facility. So in terms of the recommendations, we are recommending the preferred integrated facility be located on the Celestica site. We believe that this represents a generational investment for recreation, and it'll be one of the most unique recreation facilities in the city. We're very excited about advancing the development of this facility. We also recognize that there are a variety of planning approvals that will be required. We will have to look, and the recommendation 2 reflects those. The Section 37 agreement, the zoning bylaw has a level of detail that it's not a best practice now, but in those days they included certain square footage. We would look at we would also want to review the opportunity for new community use at the shops of Don Mills site. We recognize that there is an interest in that, having that community use at that site, and we're looking with real estate and Creatio and ourselves and planning to have that conversation with the community and come up with a proposal. We would like to extend the Don Mills Civitan Arena in the Section 37 agreement. It's slated to cease operations in 2020. We anticipate that it'll take some time, and we want to extend that because they're doing wonderful programming for the community. And we want to basically work with the Celestica landowners to expedite the transfer of the park blocks to begin the design. And we will be reporting back through the 2020 capital budget to support a stage gate approach, because this is a major capital project, and that's the protocol of the city to do that.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's our presentation. We're happy to take questions now or after the deputation.
I think what we would normally do is we'll have you stand down and we'll hear the deputations, and then as there may be questions that will come from the committee members that we would want to ask the staff after we've heard the deputations, you'll be available to answer the questions at that time. So thank you very much for the presentation. And we will now proceed to hear from the members of the public who have come today. There's been some reordering again of the speakers list here. So in fact, is it Brian Story? Is it Brian Story is to be first from the Don Mills Residents Organization. Good morning, sir. And you have 5 minutes, and there may be some questions after that.
Good morning, Mayor Tory and members of the Executive Committee. The report that you just heard about is misleading and incomplete. It contends that the city, number 1, consulted extensively, and 2, garnered support for the facility at Celestica. We, the Don Mills Residents Incorporated, known as DMRI, dispute both claims and object strenuously to the recommendations, which redirects the funds for the community center at the shops at Don Mills to the Celestica site. I'd like to provide a little background. In 2010, the city Cadillac Fairview, the owner of the shops at Don Mills and the developer, and the DMRI negotiated a Section 37 agreement approved by the OMB and by City Council. The Section 37 agreement was explicit. In it, Cadillac Fairview agreed to provide the land for the community center, to provide $17 million indexed from 2010 to build the community center, to select a not-for-profit operator to operate it for 49 years, and to do all of this by October of 2020. Penalties were built into the agreement if Cadillac Fairview failed to deliver on that agreement. In 2017, the DMRI, Cadillac Fairview, and the city staff were working together to implement the agreement. In October of 2017, Parks and Recreation Master Plan for the next 20 years was approved by City Council, and in that, the community center at the shops of Don Mills was identified as an approved and funded community center. And then in January of 2018, the city abruptly stopped meeting with the DMRI and Cadillac Fairview. They embarked on the plan recommended to you today, ignoring the legally binding agreement. I note I didn't mention it today either. Also in 2018, Cadillac Fairview agreed to provide an additional $3 million of Section 37 funding in relation to the development at 169 the Don Way, which is also part of the shops at Don Mills. And the developer for the building at 905 Don Mills Road, just south of the shops, agreed to provide an additional $550,000. In September of 2018, Councillor Denza Minimwong, he wrote to the DMRI confirming his support for building the community center at the shops of Don Mills. The city did not actually consult about the Celestica facility. Instead, through a series of pop-ups and one open house, the city promoted its preferred option of the larger facility, as you just heard, versus an alternative of a smaller facility in both cases. It considered the fact that given those two options, people preferred the larger option as support for the Celestica site. But that isn't consultation, that's selling. The city misrepresented the situation in that it did not mention that it had a legally binding agreement to build a community center at the shops of Don Mills, and not a 27,000 square foot one, but a 49,000 square foot one. The city did not mention what would be lost by their recommendation. What would be lost is the Cadillac Fairview has to build the community center in our place. Cadillac Fairview has to provide parking. Cadillac Fairview has to deal with site cleanup, and they provide an operator for 49 years. The city's process was an engagement process and not a consultation process. It was flawed, and therefore the outcome was flawed. Now, we understand that change is inevitable, but when change occurs, the city has an obligation, both legally and ethically, to negotiate with the original parties to an agreement. The city is treating the DMRI and the Don Mills community much like the Ford government is treating the City of Toronto. Neither is acceptable. So in summary then, the process for the preferred option was flawed. Where there is a legally binding agreement, the changes to it need to be negotiated. The recommendations are also flawed. Funds intended for the community are being redirected to a community at Celestica that does not yet exist and will not exist for some time. The city has many years to fund that facility. The central Don Mills community is the community negatively affected by the development of the shops. The Section 37 funds were intended to compensate the central Don Mills community for the increased height and density of the residential component of the shops. And a community center at the shops is walkable for most of central Don Mills, including students at the local schools and seniors. Central Don Mills needs a community center now. It was promised it, and it should get it. A deal is a deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Story. Are there some? We don't, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have applause here, or cheering, or booing. We just we can wave our hands if we think that was a good point, but we just don't have that because otherwise it would turn into a circus. There may be some questions. I have some. I don't know if others have some. Could I just ask you a couple of questions? You talked a lot about the money and where the money was going to come from. If, let's just put a hypothetical to you, if there was a public process, which our staff in that presentation you just heard alluded to determine a future public use for this land, if you went ahead with what's recommended here, and if within the context of that process there was money allocated in our capital budget for whatever use, whatever public use might have been suggested for that land, would your concern about the money then go away? Because it sounds like that particular concern is about where the money's going. And if we said, well, look, there's going to be money as a city, we're going to put money into whatever public use the community and the city decide should be done if we proceeded with this recommendation, would that eliminate your concern about the money?
I mean, when you say put money in, what our view is there's $17 million inflated to today, and I don't quite frankly know how much that is. There's an additional $3,550,000. If we had that money, if the city said we're prepared to spend that money in Don Mills and we can work with the staff to design the best facility we can there, our concern would go away.
Okay, that's sort of what I was, okay. The second question is, I just wanted you to, I hope to acknowledge, because I thought the staff, you know, there's often presentations we receive here where there's not acknowledgement necessarily of the fact there were other opinions. You know, they sort of speak for the majority opinion, but they just did acknowledge, and I'm sure they would have done it at a much greater length, but we wanted the presentation to be fairly brief, that there was a specific acknowledgement of the fact there was a different opinion that was gathered, and I would consider that to be consultation, whatever people think about who is selling what. I wasn't there, but that they specifically acknowledged in their report to us today and in the report that we have in front of us that there was a different opinion. So I just want to be fair to them in terms of the fact that I would consider that to be a consultation where they report to us on both opinions. They didn't just report on one or not report at all on opinions.
I grant that. But our organization held a community meeting at which we had approximately 400 people attend, and that's where, and the city staff attended that, and that's where they heard the opposition. They didn't hold.
Okay, I get it. So that wasn't part of our
exactly. It was part of our process.
But we were there, and it was reported. I understand the distinction. That's fine. Thank you. Are there any other persons wishing to, members of the committee, or Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the Speaker. So am I then to take it, sir, that you are actually fine with respect to two facilities being built?
Absolutely.
Right. It's just that what was promised, you're hoping that to be delivered.
Correct.
Right. And just in terms of distance, do you know the distance between the Eglinton location, Celestica, and I would just simply say Don Mills and Lawrence area? What's the distance, sir?
It's Don Mills and Lawrence, it would be slightly over a kilometer. The key thing, though, is that the shops at Don Mills is in the center of Don Mills. So the way Don Mills is designed is we have walkways to the center. So that kilometer is in addition to getting to the center. So if people were to walk from Don Mills, they would have to walk to the center and then walk down a kilometer to
right. The busy. Now, as part of the whole site plan process with respect to the development of the shops at Don Mills, at the time, were the residents, and you just talked a little bit about pathways with respect to the location, were those all sort of incorporated as part of the plan design so that the community would be able to simply walk to the proposed or new facility that would be designed for community amenities?
Are you referring to the one at the shops?
At the shops, yes. Yes. Well,
Correct.
I'm not the other one because I don't know enough about that point. All right, and so may I then just ask you the question about the meeting that was held? Staff had meetings. They had
pop-ups and they had an open house.
Right. So not a meeting
Not a
similar to what
community
you
meeting,
had as part of your association?
Correct.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Any other members of the committee wanting to ask this deputy a question? Okay, well, sir, thank you very much for your submissions today. Next, we go to Ahmed Hussein from the Neighborhood Organization. Is it now just the neighborhood organization because we know that it isn't just the Thorncliffe neighborhood office, it's the because it's the best one? Is that the idea?
Yes.
You're most welcome. You have 5 minutes.
And good morning, Your Honor, and the Executive Committee members. My name is Ahmed Hussein. I'm the Executive Director of the TNO, the Neighborhood Organization. TNO is a charitable organization, not-for-profit social services that serves the residents of Flemington Park, Thorncliffe Park, Crescent Town, and St. Jamestown community. I'm here to support the preferred option the city staff has recommended. We understand you have a difficult decision to make, and listening what the Don Mills community were expecting. But we also believe that we did a lot of consultation in the community, and the residents, we canvassed it and we asked them to input what this facility will bring to the community, especially Thorncliffe Park and Winford community, and also the expectation there will be a growth that's coming through the LRT, and which will be concentrated, and as the city staff said, 75% will be at Eglinton and Don Mills area. The response we received from the community were unanimous. They support the preferred option. And some of the residents are here today, the youth and the seniors in the community, and they to demonstrate that the need to have that facility in Don Mills, the Celestica Center. This is really a once-in-generation opportunity for such a facility. We believe it's the right thing to do. As our Toronto grows, so does our needs for services that enhance the livability of our city. The Don Mills community, Flemington Park community, Winford community, and also the new growth we expect in LRT, through the LRT in Don Mills and Eglinton community will significantly benefit from this center. And it is really also an unintended outcome for us, and as the neighborhood organization, we have a Thorncliffe Park, which is an adjacent community which do not have any recreation facility, who could also benefit from that. I know the city has looked at these communities, but Thorncliffe will benefit from that, and it's not that far from that. Having a seamless, I'll highlight a number of reasons that this is really important. First, the centrality of the location. The integrated one-stop shopping and seamless services that will be available for all the community, and also if you really divide that facility, and you will end up being everyone of that community will be traveling different locations to access different and some of those services. So having a one integrated facility in the community will really make significant impact to the community. The community has a large population of seniors, and both in Flemington Park, but also, and we believe the Thorncliffe community who will benefit from this facility. We have been waiting for a long time. We have not been vocal, and I understand in other communities has been vocal, but I think the community has showed a lot of patience, and we hope the preferred option that the city staff has recommended and will be the one that the council will recommend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Are there questions of this deputant? All right, I'll thank you for being here today, and I thank you for the work you do on an ongoing basis. We have lots of chance to see you. We next have Miss Vera Straka, I apologize. Vera Straka is next on the list. Good morning. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Vera Straka.
Straka, okay, thank you, ma'am. Good morning, and you are, have 5 minutes.
Resident of Don Mills for past 35 years,
Okay.
and I'm also a member of the board of DMRI.
Very good. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
I would like to talk about the report. Firstly, the options which were developed by city staff. I think the biggest, the flaw in the report which I found is the fact that the third option, and that's the community center at Don Mills as negotiated, was not put on the, not put as an option. This was negotiated, there was funds available, and very importantly, there was a time frame when this community center would happen. 2020 deadline now, that's probably not there, and the fact that the negotiations between the city, DMRI, and Cadillac Fairview stopped at the end of 2017, delayed the beginning of the process. The problem with the this wonderful integrated, seamless center is that there's basically no time frame for when this is going to happen, and is it really going to be in the location where it is shown now? The financing for the center has not been determined yet. So there is an option which provides community in the Don Mills corridor, definitely around Eglinton, between Eglinton and York Mills, access to a center which can be there much sooner than the center at the Celestica site. Now, the center which was negotiated at the Don Mills, it's 48,570 square feet, and the actual community center at the Celestica site is only around 60,000 square feet. So the community center, that's excluding the twin paths. So the Don Mills Community Center is not terribly small. Demographics, the demographics was provided by in the staff report, which deals only with the density and income. What is missing is the distribution of the population by age, and this is very significant because a community center at Celestica site may limit access to many seniors in Don Mills community, and also access of the school children to programs after school. Public consultation, there has been discussion about public consultation, and there are lots of flaws in the public consultation. They were more like presentation, and it's hard to make consultation effective if there is already a solution. So the preferred facility was always featured as the state-of-the-art destination place, superior design with lots of glass and light. An alternate option was associated with certain inadequacies. So there's immediately the bias which skews the results of the consultation process. Secondly, where these consultations happen, there is a list of them, but it appears that most of these were outside of Don Mills. The option which was at community center at the shops at the Don Mills was not, in fact, put on board. So community cannot decide on what's the best if it doesn't have all the options. So the city, in fact, excluded that option from the consultations. And the fact that our negotiations with the city stopped at 2017 and we were not involved in any consultation to participate in the developing vision for Don Mills Community Center and perhaps also participate in a bigger picture. How do we see the Eglinton and Don Mills and community south of Eglinton? The distances, the 1 kilometer distance, which is in the report, is misleading. I think Brian talked to that. A lot of communities and seniors are further away from the location of the community center at Don Mills. So 1 kilometer is much greater, and it depends on the design. So it's hard for many seniors to access the pool and other walking track and so on.
So I'll have to ask you to conclude shortly, just because we're past the 5 minutes.
Yeah. Now the feasibility, the report completely dismisses the feasibility of the community center at Don Mills. It states that there are insufficient funds, the site is too small and could not meet AODA. And there is no viable third-party operator. There is no proof that either of these 3 points are true. The cost and accessibility and design are design issues, and there is always a solution to these. In conclusion, it appears that the whole report was constructed to convince everybody that the preferred location is the only one solution.
I'll have to ask you to probably stop there. I think we're past 6 minutes now, so, okay?
Okay,
Yeah.
Can I just say one more thing?
Well, very
That we
last.
do not oppose the community center at Celestica side, but what we object for the city to transfer the money from our community to another community which does not yet exist.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just maybe start. I'm glad you made that last point, because I just have a question for you. First of all, I had no opinion. I don't think I'd ever even discussed this with anybody before the report came here to us about all of this. This all, long predates me here at the City Hall, and I heard your points about consultation. But I presume you would agree with me that it is a legitimate option for the city to look at co-locating all these facilities together. By that I mean the arena plus community facilities, pools, gyms, and so forth, from the standpoint of the staffing and the servicing of something like that, that it's a legitimate option for us to look at co-locating them, because it just makes sense, as it were, from the standpoint of how we run these things going forward for the next 50 years. I presume you think that's a legitimate thing for us to be doing, to looking at that option.
I agree, but on the other hand, what we need to look at to build sustainable communities where walking distances to all the amenities are very important, and that's the only way to go if we supposed to get carbon neutral city. So there are issues related with accessibility, and we probably need another center at Celestica, but some basic center which would serve Don Mills community. I think it's important.
Well, as you've acknowledged the validity of my point, I acknowledge the validity of yours. I think that's a valid point as well. It's one of many different considerations. The other question I would ask you is simply this. I assume as well that you would acknowledge our obligation to take cost effectiveness into account. If you assume we need a certain quantity of community facilities located in the sort of catchment area that you saw on those maps that we had, that one of the things we have to take into account as a city government and on your behalf as taxpayers is cost effectiveness of both building and operating something like that. Whether it's 2 or 1 or 3, we have to take cost effectiveness into account. I assume you'd acknowledge that.
I agree.
Okay. Those are all the questions I had. Are there others who had questions of this deputant? Otherwise, well, thank you very much for your patience and for being here this morning. Next was Dorothy Pestel from TSCC 2441 Live Lofts Condominium Corporation. Ms. Pestel, there you are, I think. Good morning.
Good morning.
You're most welcome here this morning, and as you've seen, you have 5 minutes to make whatever remarks you want, or up to 5 minutes, and then we may have some questions. Thank you.
The Oxford Dictionary defines a community as a group of like-minded people. Community is not a physical term. It's a strong and emotional feeling of belonging. If it was physical, Lawrence Park would be considered part of the same community as Yonge and Eglinton, simply because they're both on the Yonge Street corridor. Our community begins just north of York Mills Road and ends at Greenbelt Drive in Barbara Green. Our community does not include Eglinton Avenue. On Thursday, the 6th of June, 430 of my neighbors packed the Donway Covenant United Church on the Donway West to demand that our community finally get the long-awaited community center. The communities around us all have a community center. Thorncliffe Park, Flemington Park, Banbury Community, Underhill Community, Graydon Hall Community, and now Forest Manor Community also has a community center of its own. Where's ours? In the last number of years, the Don Mills community lost its curling rink, its bowling alley, and its central meeting space, the Don Mills Indoor Mall. Soon our Civitan Arena will be gone as well. Why are we the only community who doesn't have a community center? Where do we gather 8 months of the year? We have nothing. Yet some community centers are beginning to show their age, but people have a choice to go to those centers or to go to the new center that will be built. We don't have a choice. When the deal was struck to provide the Don Mills community with a community center, we were more than thrilled. The new condominium buildings at the shops, included in their documentation, was a pledge that there would be a community center on site. That was a trade-off for accepting two 30-story buildings very close to the condominium buildings. The condo buildings were designed without pools and without very much amenities. For this reason, we were going to have a community center right on site. How will the residents at Eglinton be inconvenienced by this? Seniors moved out of their houses into the new condos, secure in the knowledge that they would have one day soon, they'd be able to walk to a meeting place, to a pool, and to a climate-changed indoor walking track. This is a document in our disclosure statement of all the condominium buildings in the area that says we're getting a community center. There were many young families at our June 6th meeting, and as well, a number of the 430 people in attendance were longtime Don Millsers. Most have lived in the community since the 1960s, and while some are still vibrant, they rely on walkers to get around now. Our counselor suggested they could walk down to Don Mills in Eglinton, or it would only 2 bus stop ride. How can you get a walker on a TTC, and how can you walk down to Don Mills in Eglinton with a walker? And for those of our residents that live closer to York Mills Road, it's 10 bus stops and 4 kilometers down, and he suggested we could walk. The city may have engaged 525 people across all age groups. However, most of them were outside our community. And the community center is being pulled from, outside the community, whose community center is being pulled out from under them. We want the community center we've been waiting for. Demographics are immaterial. We don't expect Flemington Park or crosstown people to come to our community center. We don't have to serve 20,000 people. We just have to serve the local community, ours. And why is household income a factor at all? We're not opposing the creation of a state-of-the-art regional complex at Crosstown. I think it's a great idea. I think it's great for Flemington Park and for Thorncliffe Park and whoever wants to use it. But it has nothing to do with our community center. I'd like everyone to acknowledge the raw deal that we've been dealt. Our community has loyally supported our counselor for the past 24 years, and we really feel we've been thrown under the bus. We need some place to gather, a place where youth programs will keep our younger residents busy and out of trouble. Please don't leave my community with nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pastel. Are there questions of this deputy?
I have a question. So, Dorothy, I'm on the DMRI website, and there's a map that shows the DMRI catchment area, and it goes all the way down to Eglinton. Would you agree with that, that's the
That's our
map?
catchment area. That's not our community. Our community does not go down to Eglinton. Our community, as I mentioned, is a feeling of like-minded people. We are a very strong community. We will never belong to the crosstown community, whether that's in our catchment area or not. That's a catchment area. We send newsletters that far.
So you have
There actually is nobody living there.
So Area 1 is, which includes the Celestica site, is represented by the DMRI president, Eric Comm. Is that correct?
By who?
Eric Comm, your president, represents
Yeah.
Area 1 where Celestica is.
Area 1, yeah.
Okay, so that's in Don Mills. According to this
It's in
map.
It's in the postal district of Don Mills, yes.
Okay.
It's not the Don Mills community.
Thank you.
Could I just ask you a question, sort of along the same lines? I've been working really hard since I've had this job, and I understand what you're saying. You know, I did live in Lawrence Park at one time in my life, and I understand that that was a sort of a community in the context in which you're referring to it. But I've been working really hard in this job to make sure that we all felt, and we all feel across the city, because it's one of the real difficulties we've had in an amalgamated city, is that people feel they're all part of the city of Toronto. And you would acknowledge that while you may be part of the Don Mills community, you're also part of the city of Toronto, of which Eglinton and Don Mills, and for that matter, Don Mills and York Mills, or Don Mills and Shepherd, these are all part of the city. So in that sense, we have some obligation, you'll understand, to look at things that way, at least in part, as we make decisions here for the benefit of all the people of the city, and even all the people in a slightly broader catchment area that you do understand that.
Yeah.
And why that's desirable for a city where we're trying to bring people together.
We're not opposing the regional community center at Eglinton. We're not opposing that. I think it's a great idea. But every area surrounding the Don Mills community at Don Mills and Lawrence has its own community center. They just had one built at Forest Manor, and there's going to be one at Bessarion, and there's the community center in Banbury, and all around us, except for the Don Mills and Lawrence area. We're the only ones that don't have a community center. Our people at Don Mills and Lawrence and north of Lawrence can't walk down to Don Mills and Eglinton. A lot of our seniors are using walkers. It was suggested by Denzel that we could walk down, or it was only a two-ride bus drive. You can't get a walker on the TTC. So the fact of the matter is, if we don't get our community center, as has been promised to us for the last 10 years, and for which we have the money to build, if it's not stolen from us, our people in the Don Mills and Lawrence area will not have a community center. We cannot go down to that one. We will not go down to that one anyway. We don't feel it's part of our community. All we want is what we've been promised. All the condos in that whole area surrounding the shops in Don Mills bought in there because there was going to be a community center. I worked with Fram Building when we built the whole of the shops at Don Mills. And we decided that we weren't going to put in swimming pools in those buildings or a lot of amenities because we were going to have a community center. That was the idea, that there weren't swimming pools put in those buildings. Everybody's waiting for their community center. We have 8 public junior schools in the Don Mills and Lawrence area that can walk to a community center at Don Mills and Lawrence. There are no schools, nor will there be any schools, that can walk to a community center at Don Mills and Eglinton. Don Mills and Eglinton Community Center is going to have lots of people go to it. That's fine. That's lovely. But it's not going to be us. It's not going to be our schools that are going to be able to walk in the middle of the school year and take lessons or whatever it is they do at a community center and then go back to their school. or walk from their home to the community center. The parents aren't going to let children get on the bus or walk down to Eglinton from Don Mills and Lawrence. All we're asking for is our own little local community center. We don't care what you build down at Eglinton. We've got the money indexed from 2010. We've got enough money with all the Section 37 money with the post office site and the other building going up just down the street. We can put up our own community center. And one of the things that I read in some of the documents was that our community center plan wasn't very good because the swimming pool was going to be in the basement. Well, I've got a copy of it, and the swimming pool is not in the basement. It's on the main level, and two of the walls are window walls, one facing south and one facing west. This was a concept. It was never designed to be in the basement. It was designed to have natural light come in. I don't know where that idea came from to start with. And also, if it was such a bad idea, why is the city using the same design team to build the community center at Eglinton if they didn't like the design team that was building the center at Lawrence? It's the same team. It's Giannoni and Petriconi or whatever it's called. It's the same team that's building the one down there. If they didn't think they were good, why would they choose the same company?
Thank you very much. Any other questions of the deputant? Okay, thank you, Ms. Patel. We appreciate that. The next deputant is Adil Patel, Friends of Flemington Park. Good morning. You have 5 minutes to make your remarks, up to 5 minutes.
Good morning, Mayor Tory, Deputy Mayor Madam Wong, and Executive Committee members. My name is Adil Patel. I am the Vice Chair of the Friends of Flemington Park. FOF is a grassroots association in partnership with local agencies and partners that supports the residents of Flemington Park. We act as community leaders and provide a strong voice for the Flemington Park community. I won't take a bunch of your time, but I am here to represent residents of Flemington Park who are in support of the city's preferred option. For the proposed 125,000 square foot Don Mills Community Recreation Center at Don Mills and Eglinton on the Celestica lands, we have held many community meetings with residents to discuss their preference and can report to you that there is a unanimous approval of the city's preferred option. Residents have signed petitions to indicate support for the larger community center option. The current community center in Flemington Park, the Dennis R. Trimble Resource and Community Center, does not meet the needs of the 25,000 plus people in the vicinity of Flemington Park. Facility needs significant repairs. We understand that the city is committed to maintaining the community center in Flemington, but we will have to wait for major repairs until the option that is approved today is built out. The Don Mills corridor includes Farron Park and Flemington Park. The preferred option is also the best model to serve the total community of Don Mills, not just the residents between Lawrence Avenue and the Donway. We certainly understand and are sympathetic to the Don Mills Residents Association, who supports the alternate proposal option. The smaller community center at Donway and Don Mills was promised to the DMRI, but as cities evolve over the years, so too must the city. Plans to serve the greater needs and the ever-expanding population within the city. The larger facility would be state-of-the-art, one of the largest facilities in the city of Toronto. We acknowledge the communities play an important role in the development and contributions towards city planning. We are here today for this reason. This is once in a generational opportunity. We believe the right thing to do is build a livable city, a stated mission of the city of Toronto. I also want to acknowledge all the TNO youth and seniors that came out to support today, this morning. It's been a long day for them. Thank you for your time allowing me to speak on behalf of my community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of the deputant? Hearing none, I will thank you very much, Mr. Patel. Thank you for your patience. Larry Steinhauer, Don Mills Residents, Inc. Good morning, Mr. Steinhauer. You have up to 5 minutes to make your remarks, and you're most welcome here this morning.
Mayor Tory,
Members of the council, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Larry Steinhauer and I reside at 1200 Don Mills Road, where I've lived for 30 years. I've been a member of the Don Mills Residents Association for many years, and I'm very impressed with how it looks after its members and the rest of the Don Mills community on behalf of its residents. Having lived in the area for 30 years, I've seen Don Mills Plaza go from an open mall-type plaza to an enclosed building and back to an outside accessible mall, now known as the Shops of Don Mills. The closed mall was a community mall where people would congregate, visit, have coffee, shop, and walk around. The neighborhood and area has changed dramatically since Cadillac Fairview came on the scene. Once it was known that there was going to be condos built to accommodate roughly 2,500 people in the quadrant bordered by Don Mills, Lawrence Avenue East, and the Donway West, DMRI was constantly on top of the situation, fighting the proposed density. I quote from the spring 2019 article in the DMRI News. In 2010, we negotiated an agreement regarding the Phase 2 of the Shops at Don Mills. There were 3 parties to this agreement: Cadillac Fairview, the city, and DMRI. That agreement included, among other things, a commitment by Cadillac Fairview and the city to build a community center at the northwest corner of Don Mills Road and the Donway West. $17 million indexed was set aside to build the community center. The essential issue now is that the city is attempting to move the money allocated for our community center at the Shops to the Celestica site, where it would be combined with one plan there. That community center will include a twin-pad arena, which will replace the arena at the Shops. Prior to the recent municipal election, we had received a letter from Councillor Denzel Menon Wong, which stated his support, and I have this letter dated September the 21st, 2018, sent to Mr. Eric Kahn, president of DMRI, which says, based on the strong support from the Don Mills community, I am writing to confirm my support for the proposed Don Mills Community Center project at the corner of Don Mills Road and the Donway, agreed to by the City of Toronto, Cadillac Fairview, and the Don Mills Residents, Inc. Until the last municipal election, when the electrical boundaries were changed, we were privileged to have Councillor Jay Robinson working with us to fight for our reduced density and our community center. Unfortunately, when the boundaries changed, we were now represented by Councillor Denzel Menon Wong, who initially gave the original project his support, but has done a complete turnaround since the supporting a very smaller center at the Shops at Don Mills, and suggesting that the Section 37 money, which now has a value of over $21 million, be turned over to the new Celestica Community Center, which is considerably larger than the 48,570 square feet facility originally planned for the Shops, to be completed by 2020. The $21 million is not the city's money. It is an amount that was accumulated, given for community center at Don Mills in the Donway West by Cadillac Fairview in concession for the increased density. The original amount of $17 million has nothing to do with the Celestica project, nor should it have anything to do with it. In a meeting on June 27th, Denzel Menon Wong gave a speech to the neighborhood organization annual general meeting about the need to support the regional recreational center. He also gave out another handout dated June 27, 2019, giving numerous websites that people can refer to support the new Celestica site. I ask you all sitting there in judgment, what does a signed agreement mean? DMRI, the City of Toronto, and Cadillac Fairview had a signed agreement to build a 48,570 square foot facility in 2010. The facility was to be completed in 2020. We are now in the second half of 2019, and the viability of this center in limbo in spite of the signed agreement. Is there any point in DMRI pursuing our original agreement or any agreement as far as this is concerned? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Steinhauer. Are there questions of this deputy? Council, the Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Sir, can you identify for me the boundaries of the Don Mills community?
The Don Mills community, I would say the Don Mills community that we are talking about is basically along the Donway West, north to York Mills Road, from Victoria Park over to Leslie.
And sorry, how far south does it go?
South
How far south?
to the Donway West,
Donway West.
at the bottom of the shops of Don Mills.
So it's rather limited then. It doesn't go as far as Barber Green then.
No, it doesn't go as far as.
But as I heard from Councillor and Deputy Mayor Min Wong, your website says it goes to Barber Green.
You heard
Is there a misunderstanding?
Denzel Menon Wong that he supported this.
No, just sir, with respect, the website reference that it goes to Barber Green.
All right,
Sorry?
that's fine, okay, then it will go to Barbara Green.
So what I'm trying to understand, though, it seems that there are changing with respect to the view as to where does the community actually goes. I don't know the community that well, so that's why I'm asking you the question.
I would think that if you were to look at the boundaries of it back in 2010, when the agreement was signed, then you would probably have it down around the Donway West, and then subsequently it could have been changed to include down to Barbara Green.
Right. So the issue for you specifically, sir, in terms of you speaking here today, is simply that an agreement was actually made, and in fact you wish that agreement to be kept. Is that the issue for you?
That's the issue. The issue was made that the agreement was kept. The money was supplied by Cadillac Fairview, not the City of Toronto. The community center was going to be built, and now all of a sudden that money, which I consider to be the Don Mills money, has been turned over to the Celestica project, which it belongs because of the fact that we agreed to increase density in that agreement. We got that money for our community, and I consider the community to be where the shops in Don Mills and where the original.
I see. And so because the city now has a larger perspective and view that does not define the community as just to your specific area.
That's right.
And wishes to change that, you are fundamentally in opposition to that.
That's right.
I see. All right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very much, Deputy Mayor Thompson. And are there any other questions for Mr. Steinhauer? Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Steinhauer, for your answers and for your comments. We appreciate that. Caroline Schwepp is next. Ms. Schwepp here. Here we are. Good morning. You're most welcome here, and you have 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes to make your remarks.
Thank you. Well, hopefully I won't take 5 minutes. My name is Caroline Schwepp. I'm a resident of the Don Mills area. Moved to the neighborhood about 12, 13 years ago, and have watched the developments in the Don Mills community with a great deal of interest. I think we all agree that the developments that we're talking about within that entire area are really critical to the future state of the city of Toronto. And I don't think this is a question of a discussion about either or. The reality is that communities need community space. They need places for our young people and our older people to engage with each other, to undertake sports activities. So, I think there's been a lot of discussion here as to one versus the other. And the reality is, in fact, that we all know that we need community spaces. The other fact of the matter is that there is a letter of agreement with the Don Mills Residents Association which indicates that money that was allocated from the construction of condominiums and other facilities in the Don Mills, the shops at Don Mills area, was to be allocated to a community centre in that particular site. There has been some discussion at this group, and I've attended the meeting that was hosted by the Don Mills Association. There was some discussion about the fact that the city had undertaken some community studies. And I would fundamentally disagree with that. A pop-up in a supermarket is not an engagement study. And whether or not 538 people walk through the supermarket in an afternoon or in the local library in the afternoon does not an engagement study make. Over 400 people showed up at the recent meeting that Mr. Min Wong had attended to express their viewpoints about the fact that the city had reneged on this deal. So I think that there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors going on here. The reality is there is a deal in place, and the deal allocated $17 million plus forward interest payments on that $17 million for a community centre. And the city has reneged on the deal. And that deal was signed 10 years ago. We're now talking about a future plan which fundamentally makes a total sense to anybody who's in this room. I don't think anybody would disagree with the needs for that particular site. But that's currently a discussion paper. Are we going to have another 10 years or 20 years waiting for that? And in the meantime, what's going to happen to the money from the Section 37 funds that were allocated for the community space and promised for the community space in the area to which it was identified? That's all I have to say today. Thank you very much for your time.
And I thank you for yours and for your comments. You just stay there for 1 second because there may be a question for you. Are there questions of this applicant? Okay, Ms. Schwepp, well, thank you very much for your comments. They're appreciated. Next is Wendy Pauling. Good morning, Ms. Pauling.
Good morning.
You're welcome here this morning, and you have up to 5 minutes to make remarks, and there may be some questions.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And I'm a resident of Don Mills, and I live in the North End, closer to York Mills. And I wanted to just give you my thoughts. First of all, no one here should be surprised by or dismissive of the objections you hear today. The Don Mills community has been waiting for this center for a very long time. The 2010 OMB agreement signed by all parties assured us the facility would be built at the shops. The master recreation plan for 2019-2038 that council approved was further assurance. No doubt about it, and fully funded by Section 37 funds that we thought were safe. The city can build a regional community center at Don Mills and Eglinton. Surely it's going to be needed with the development you're planning there. But don't mix up our center with your proposal. It's a separate issue. What I take issue with, you're disregarding the OMB agreement. You are now saying the land at Don Mills and Donway is insufficient to satisfy the agreement. How is this possible after all these years, after you've approved it, and now it's not good enough? You are ignoring your own guidelines that you developed on Section 37 and how it should be used. Our central Don Mills area has not been adequately consulted or communicated with about the new plan. Was there an intent to avoid us? The report diminishes our concerns. It references that there is some opposition. There isn't some opposition. There's a lot of opposition in the Don Mills community. And why is the alternate model so quickly dismissed? Because it is a marketing campaign you've been doing. Why is the alternate model dismissed when it's really us and our money that is are most affected? We stand to lose the most. Should we not have a say? What happened with Parkway Forest, 50,000 square feet community center using Section 37 funds? Did you go to the very broad region to get input on that, or did you go to the local neighborhood that's impacted by development? This report refers to the Don Mills corridor, although it's not really a corridor. The corridor extends to neighborhoods beyond Don Mills Road to Leslie and York Mills and east to the Don River. This area is not well served by community facilities. There's one small Banbury that has very few services. But people will travel to the shops at Don Mills. The Don Mills Center has always been the center of Don Mills. People traveling there now, but there's nothing else to do there. This community center would be a perfect place for people to gather and facilities for families and seniors. This report suggests people want all the bells and whistles in a large facility. First of all, there are no figures how many people are in your survey, how many people you consulted with, and what the percentage said this or that. But in your report of 2017, when asked about their preferences for recreation facility size and number of features, a majority of respondents, 58%, expressed a preference for small facilities that are closer to their home instead of large facilities with more features that are further from them. And the other thing about your population projections, I don't know if you've covered everything that's happening on York Mills Road, but that is also part of our community. And as I said, there is not anything in the Leslie York Mills area. So anyway, you know, Don Mills was the first planned community, and we had many facilities there when I grew up there. Don Mills Shopping Center defined the area. We're giving up the arena. Give us a facility. I sense the excitement of staff to think about this new development that's taken precedence, this new development at Celestica. But I hate to think because of it, we have now lost what we were excited about happening at the community at Don Mills.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pauling. Are there questions of this deputy? Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate those. Vanessa Quinn. Good morning, Ms. Quinn.
Good morning.
You're welcome here, and you have up to 5 minutes for your remarks.
Okay, my name is Vanessa Quinn. I am a resident and a teacher at Don Mills Middle School, and I'm first going to speak towards the invisible population, which is not mentioned in this report, and that is the marginalized children of Don Mills. Then after, I'm going to mention a piece of DMRI business. I do sit on the board. Within the Don Mills community and community I take from above the railway tracks, which is just where Underhill is, up to York Mills, and from Leslie over to the Don River, children and youth compose 24% of the population. However, that population increases significantly during the daytime. Both Don Mills Middle and Don Mills Collegiate have a catchment which extends down to the Science Center to St. Denis Drive. So during the daytime, we have a huge increase of youth. There are several public schools, a collegiate, a Catholic school, private schools, all within the Don Mills area, which total past 8, which comprise about 3,000 children. So at 3:30, those 3,000 children have nowhere to go except the public library because we have no facilities for children after school. There are no after-school programs for children in our community. And in fact, Mallow Road School was pulled down, so we in fact lost a soccer field and a baseball diamond on top of that. In the report, it says that the annual household income in Don Mills is $151,000. According to the city's own statistics of Banbury Don Mills in 2016, the median household income for our area is $77,000, of which 20% of the residents of Don Mills live below the poverty line. These are people who live in the old 1950s apartments on Don Mills Road and on Lawrence, apartments with no elevators, which is why their rent is cheaper. And they sacrifice to live in our community because the shops at Don Mills is very expensive. So there is a false attitude that Don Mills is a very affluent community that has a lot of money. That is not true. I have children who show up without food. I have children who can't afford to buy running shoes. I've had to give children clothing. That is the reality of Don Mills, and there are no facilities for these children. I'm particularly struck by the Parks and Recreation report, which I find illustrates systemic discrimination of the marginalized community within Don Mills. First of all, there was a pop-up at the Metro grocery store, one of the most expensive grocery stores in Canada. Poor people don't shop at Metro. They shop at the No Frills at Victoria Park. Well, there was a pop-up at mid-afternoon on Saturdays at the local library. Most working poor work in retail, and on Saturdays they're working. They're not available to go to a pop-up. Oh no, but there was a large community meeting with maps and explanations at the Science Center. Well, the Science Center is at least a 30 to 40 to 50 to 60-minute walk, depending on where you live within the community, which means poor people would have to take transit, and if you live below the poverty line, $6 for return TTC fare versus food, what are you going to take? Our community, by the way, has a food bank. Yes, in Don Mills, we have a food bank open twice a week and is always under demand. I find that even in attachment 2, there is a statement that says participants from the Don Mills and Lawrence community specifically requested that meetings be held closer in their neighborhood, yet in the main report, it says there was extensive consultation. So even Parks and Rec is not sure about what they were doing. So I find that the voice of the poor was totally ignored in any consultation, pop-up, contact. They are not represented here. They are the invisible voice that is not heard. I also find this pitting of communities against each other reprehensible. I was a resident of Thorncliffe Park for 17 years in my youth. I am not against Thorncliffe. I am not against Flemington. However, the poor of Thorncliffe, the poor of Flemington, and the poor of Don Mills all deserve equal access to services. They all deserve having a level playing field to achieve what our city promotes in its mission statement. And I think that's not present here.
I'll have to ask you to wrap up, just because we're just at 5.5
Yes.
minutes now.
And I just want to mention something from the DMRI. That is, we have filed a letter from our solicitor with you, the last line of which says the DMRI is fully prepared to take legal action to enforce its rights under the minutes, including by seeking injunctive relief. We hope that such a step will not be necessary and that the committee will reject the staff recommendation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Quinn. Are there questions of the deputy? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, so keeping in mind that the poor can live anywhere,
yes,
you've made a study of it. So by and large, on average, where are the largest concentrations that are feeding into Don Mills schools?
Within the Don Mills area itself,
yeah,
they are on the Don Way West in the low-rise apartment buildings there. They are on Wynn Green Court on the Don Way East. That's the northeast quadrant. There is a whole lane or road of low-rise apartment buildings, about 6 or 7 of them.
Yeah.
They are along Lawrence from the Shoppers, which is the Don Way West, going towards Leslie on the north side. Those are all lower income apartment buildings. And they are on Don Mills Road, right across from the shops, not including the seniors' home, which is an expensive home, but the other buildings are low rental buildings.
Right.
And then the school also pulls
primarily
from Flemington Park, so the St. Denis, so that's Toronto Housing. So we have a significant proportion of Toronto Housing children attending both Don Mills Middle and Don Mills Collegiate.
Right, but if they're from St. Denis,
that area,
they would walk right by either one of these community centers, whichever one gets built.
The issue is, though, because it's not optional attendance, it's part of our catchment, children make the decision. And when they make the decision to come to the schools in Don Mills, that's where their friends are.
Right.
So when they go back home, their friends aren't there. Their friends are up in Don Mills. So they'll have some friends in Flemington, but some friends in Don Mills.
Right,
So
yeah,
the
it's
students tend
generally
to,
more like that.
they aggregate around the school and around that area because that's where their friends are.
Depending on their level of activity, they socialize quite differently than us, wouldn't you agree?
Oh,
Due
of
to
course.
social media, I'm finding that nowadays, due to social media, kids' friends tend to be all over the city, depending on their activity.
Although it's healthier for children to have active activities are...
Oh, no question.
I mean, the school grounds are used heavily after school by students, but there just isn't, there aren't enough facilities.
Yeah, I just meant, wouldn't you agree, though, social media, it's not what's happening is it's turning out they're not couch potatoes. Social media leads to you linking up and finding your friends and then going to them.
But it doesn't replace
that's sort
a
of what's
human
going on.
contact. Kids still like...
No, it leads to the human contact. Wouldn't you agree that that's the change between how they arrange their dates with...
well, I would say social media leads to their self-identity. So that's how they identify peer-wise through social media.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Are there other questions of the deputy? All right. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Quinn, for your comments and for your answers to the questions. And that brings us to Howard Smith.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Smith. All right, it's good afternoon now, I guess.
Yes, it is. I wondered if that was going to happen, then I forgot to check.
You have 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes, and then there may be some questions.
Thank you. In a month or so, I'm going to be moving to Don Mills, and I have had extensive contact with Don Mills for many, many years since I was born. I don't have a lot that's different to say that hasn't been said already today, including a few things that people elaborated on that I wondered about. For me, some of the major points, I mean, it was clear to me the city report was designed to have the committee decide to not do the previously agreed upon community center at the Donway property and instead move all of that down to the Celestica site. And as someone said it recently, I mean, the whole report is basically pitting one neighborhood in the Don Mills area against another, and I found it very difficult to accept that this is essentially what was going on, and that really, the city should be interested in, all of Don Mills and all of the city, not just certain neighborhoods. And I feel that the purpose of the report to totally disregard the Section 37 deal from 2010 that has been eloquently spoken about already several times. It just wasn't fair to the people of Central Don Mills who have been waiting for this community center for a very long time. The point has been very well made that the money for this community center came from the developer in return for fairly high density residential properties, and that any retroactive decision by the city not to build this community center in favor of another area of the city is inappropriate. I'm in absolute agreement that the communities, the neighborhoods down near Don Mills and Eglinton, especially with the growth coming, should have adequate facilities as well. I don't understand why the point of view has been to retroactively renege on the agreement from 2010. It just doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't accept any reason that's been offered, including the fact that this community center actually hasn't been built yet. And obviously, if it had been, the feasibility of taking it back would not have been possible. I don't understand why, aside from the two-pad arena, a newly developed residential area in Celestica is to get under the preferred alternative is to get a community center. The area of Don Mills, south of Don Mills, with a community center already for a very long time that's now reached its capacity given the size of the population. why the proposal is for them to have a community, the additional facilities they need brought on soon, almost as soon as they need it. And yet, in contrast, the community farther north, around central Don Mills and Lawrence, has waited forever for a community center, and not only has paid for it, but basically now it seems is possibly going to have it unilaterally taken away. And I just don't understand the difference in how these three neighborhoods are being created. I disagreed with some of the speakers earlier about the definition of the geographical area of Don Mills. I think it's a little bit imprecise, but I think anyone narrowly focusing only on their own particular neighborhood and calling that Don Mills is not appropriate. So basically it. I think the city should continue to commit to the 2010 deal and build the community center at the Donway property. And I absolutely would like to request that the committee also recommend that that adequate recreational facilities be built at the Celestica site for the community there now and for the development that's coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Are there questions of this deputy? All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate your patience and your being here today with us. So that brings us to the end, unless I'm mistaken, of the deputations we had registered. And it would leave us time before we have a lunch break to begin with questions of staff. And maybe I could ask the staff to come back, just because it's probably easier to have you assembled up here as you were for the presentation. Is that, or you can stay there. If you're all sitting right there, so that's fine. If you're all together, that's good. Who has some questions of staff? Councillor Carroll.
Yes. So right off the bat, in an early deputation, in your presentation, you said that what was contemplated for the center that would be at Lawrence and the Donway was a gym and multi-purpose rooms. So one of the deputants talked about there having been a pool contemplated there, and that pools were negotiated out of the condos in exchange for there was going to be a pool in the community center. Was that the case?
So the amenity provisions that were provided in the condo were up to the developer at the time, and those varied, and planning can speak to that piece. But in terms of the in the Section 37 agreement, there was a pool, a competition-sized pool reflected, a gym, and a series of multi-purpose rooms. And that's where in the 37 agreement, and it is addressed in our report around the challenges of the 37 agreement and the facility that was proposed. So it's around a 48,000 plus square foot facility on about a 46,000 square foot site. So it based on today's standards, our assessment was that it is an overbuild for the site and didn't meet some of the requirements. So that's where the difference. In our alternate proposal, we took the pool out, put it on the preferred facility, and had the gym and the program rooms on the Don Mills site.
Okay, I've got a few more questions here. First of all, there are going to be, if you go with the preferred option, there are going to be activities and facilities here that don't exist in the smaller center in Flemington Park. Will there be priority status here, or is there some low-income programming other than welcome letter, or they'll just use welcome letter?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the preferred facility would be a larger, multi-purpose, multifunctional community recreation center that would have the same policies, the same programming, the same access approaches as any of our other community recreation centers. So,
but it wouldn't be priority center?
Based on the demographics, it would not be a free center.
Okay.
But participants could access the welcome policy just as they do with any of our other programs.
Okay, I'm going to try and fit in two more there. One of the deputants talked about not even, this is a discussion paper, not even believing that the Crosstown Center would be built. I'm not 100% familiar with the Crosstown proposal. Is there phasing or hold provisions in there such that that there's a lever, they have to build that center before they can build some of their condos, similar to what we did in Parkway Forest?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there are provisions that phase the Celestica development. There are provisions. There's provisions for the park block itself after it is cleaned and conveyed to the city. There's not an outside date though. There's an
Is there a lever such that they can't make all their money until after they've built the community center?
Yes, there is.
Okay, good. And lastly, the biggest gap here, we heard from one of the late deputants, is not having enough after-school programming, not having enough seniors programming. Has there been a scan to look at, if you're not going to build a center there, how you might accommodate that otherwise? Is there a scan of the need in the Donway area that could accommodate it such that we know there's before and after school programming to the max, seniors programming in spaces where we might do it by contract? What are the provisions to accommodate in the way of gathering space and children's programming?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't done a specific scan in that particular area, in the Donway area, but it certainly is an exercise that we could endeavor and look at the level of service that's currently being provided and whether there are facilities available such as schools and others where we could deliver some additional programming in the meantime.
So you would entertain that being a condition, if council was to go with your preferred option, council could add that and you would be able to do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'd have no objection to that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carroll, Deputy Mayor Minnan Wong, questions?
Yeah, a couple of rapid-fire questions that I think are important. So with regard to the agreement, and I have the minutes of settlement here, so within the minutes of settlement, there's supposed to be a competition-sized swimming pool, fitness area, running track, meeting rooms, gymnasium, and auditorium, all for $17 million adjusted for inflation on the Shops at Don Mills site. Is there enough money there?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'll ask staff to comment as well. Our assessment of the $17 million, which was based on $350 a square foot, plus the inflationary increments, which would bring it up to roughly $21 million, would not be able to provide a 48,000 square foot.
So the money's not there.
That's correct.
Okay. Second question is, and this is with regard to consultation. We hired a firm, independent firm, to do this consultation, yes?
Yes, we hired Laura, the facilitation firm, to undertake the consultation process.
So we had consultations with stakeholders in Flemington, yes?
Yes?
And that we had consultations with the Civitan, yes?
Yes, we did.
Civitan is stakeholders. We also had a meeting with the executive of the DMRI, yes?
Yes, we did.
We all asked their opinion and what they thought, yes?
Yes, we did.
Also the institutional people like the Ismaili Center, Japanese Cultural Center. We talked to them as well.
Yes, we did.
Have I missed any small group where we had stakeholder meetings?
We also did the Winford community.
Yes, we did. And they were, all of these groups, except for the DMRI, they were broadly and generally supportive of the preferred site. Is that correct?
Yes, they were.
Okay. So you would classify this based on your experience as extensive consultation?
Yes, I would.
And we also had two community meetings on the same day, one in the early afternoon, one in the late afternoon. We had a public presentation, and we also had many of your staff there taking notes, asking people which site they preferred, and also having this, what is it called, dotmocracy, where people could put dots on which site they would prefer. Is that correct?
Yes, we did.
And save and except for the DMR, the folks in the Don Mills area, by and large, the majority of people were supportive of the preferred site.
Yes, we had a great deal of support for the preferred site outside of the Don Mills and Lawrence community.
So we also did pop-ups at the Metro, at the library, at the Superstore, and there was some comment about we weren't talking to people who can't afford the Metro, so we also went down to Sonny's,
Yes.
at, let's say, a different offering, and we asked them as well. Is that correct?
Yes, and we also were at Dennis Timbrell, and we went to Playground Paradise.
And so thank you on the consultation. The third and final piece I'll ask is, why don't we build small community centers anymore?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, and a lot of this is documented in the Facilities Master Plan, which was approved by Council a couple of years ago. Our experience with smaller communities is that given the growth and the population, the density of some communities, such as this one, is they can be undersized and not able to provide enough service and amenities in the community to actually serve the demand. So as noted in the presentation, by combining a number of different components together into a larger, multi-purpose recreation center, we have the ability to offer more programming and deliver more based on the demand in the community.
So you can deliver more programming by having a larger facility?
That's correct.
And does your data show that more people want to go to a large facility?
That's correct. Our data certainly shows that the larger facilities have the largest, participation.
And is that because smaller facilities, for lack of a better term, aren't as fun?
Smaller facilities, just by virtue of it being a smaller facility, have less amenities to offer in the building and therefore less programs. They also, because there's less amenities, they don't have the same operating hours as larger facilities, which would operate a pool and other amenities that, extend the length of time that a building may be open.
Does that make smaller facilities harder to program?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Madam Wong. Councillor Nunziata.
Just hearing the deputants, it sounds like that they felt that when the agreement was signed, that the agreement was for exclusive use of the condo owners and the residents and the development. So is that the case? Is there anywhere in the agreement that says that they had their own private community center?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, that's not part of the agreement. The community center is intended through the agreement to be a publicly accessible community center.
And anyone could use the community center. We're all residents of the city, correct?
That's correct.
For example, the York Community Center, which we just opened and took years to build, people from all over the city use that community center. It's a big community center, and it has all the facilities, and that's the reason it was built, that it's not just for the community in York, it's for the whole city of Toronto?
That's correct. Our experience has been that participation in community centers is generally within around a 3 to 5 kilometer radius, but certainly there's no resident in the city that is precluded from participating at any of our publicly accessible recreation centers.
Thank you.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, we've heard about the costing in the $17 million, which has been indexed, and we've heard that that's now has a value of about $21 million. What is the overall cost of the preferred facilities that you're proposing to be built?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the entire preferred facility cost is approximately $80 million. That includes $24 million, which has already been allocated and approved in past budgets for the double pad Civitan Arena. And to get us to the $80 million, certainly there's a lot of development ongoing in the area, and we'll be looking at all of those development funding sources.
Right. The residents have spoken about the issues around seniors and having access. How does that translate to other areas in the city? Are there similar challenges with respect to seniors having access to community facilities across the city?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have arrangements at other community centers, particularly those that serve a high senior demographic, with arrangements, for example, with community buses that provide direct routes from seniors intensified areas to the community centers, as one example of way that we address mobility issues.
So this would be what would be proposed as well for this area?
This would absolutely be something we would investigate and likely arrange for.
Now, it seems to me that this particular facility, and I think the term's been used, it's generational. What does that mean for a community facility of this type? What is that, the whole concept of generational facility, what does that mean?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we are taking a very planned approach around how we are approaching these large multi-component facilities and doing our due diligence and looking at the generational population growth in the area that they would serve. So not just looking at who is there now, but who is going to be there 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. we're trying very hard not to underbuild facilities so that when the community grows, we literally cannot provide enough service for the large growing community.
Now, the alternative proposal is slated for, if it were to be built, would be built on 1 acre of land. Is that correct? Is that what was said?
So the alternative proposal would be 2 facilities. The facility with the gym would be on the smaller Shops at Don Mills site, and then the pool and twin pad arena with a couple of program rooms would be on the other site.
Right. And so the preferred facility, though, you're looking at a larger lot or acreage of the 5.8 acres?
Yes, it would. It's very rare that we get a park of that size in the city.
Right. With respect to some of the comments were made by residents about sort of the changes with respect to the agreement, how often do we go through a process of changing Section 37 agreements, and what's the principles involved?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have changed Section 37 agreements. This Section 37 is pretty specific, outlining a specific size of a community center. We are not typically that specific. Nowadays, the way we do things, we have clauses in the Section 37 agreements that state if the money is not spent within a certain period of time, that money can be reallocated with consultation with the local ward councillor and the chief planner.
So I guess my final question, given that we've now heard that there's approximately $21 million available, there are essentially 2 facilities as it relates to the alternative proposal, what is then the total cost to build that particular site? Because one of the things that was said earlier was about, a comment was made about stealing our money. I'm just wondering, is there sufficient funds to actually build the alternative proposal that's actually here?
So through you, Mr.
I mean,
Mayor,
essentially, will monies be stolen from other areas to be able to put into this area?
based on the recommendations we have before council, our recommendation would not be to build both facilities as they were envisioned in the original Section 37 agreement, as well as the alternate facility. We would be looking at all of the funds that are available in the area around the new community center, and also new funding that is available through additional growth and development tools in the area.
Thank you.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Thompson, I have just a couple of questions. If there's no one else, I'll ask my questions, and I'll just ask that we might extend 5 minutes beyond 12:30 because Councillor Ainslie, I think, has what amounts to a quick release. I think it should be a fairly expeditious motion, I think. And did you? Okay, great. And then we'll come back to speeches after. So all those in favor of extending just for a few minutes past 12:30, thank you. So here are my questions for staff. And I should say, as I said earlier on in questioning one of the deputants, this thing predates, obviously, with the 2010 agreement, my own presence here. And so I look at it from the standpoint of just asking a series of practical questions. The first one I wanted to ask is, do we have standards, if I can call it that, with respect to the proximity of both one community center to another, and the proximity of neighborhoods, plural, to a community center? Do we have standards? And if so, where does this fit with the sort of, and I'm prepared to accept the fact that some of the deputants pointed out that if you live north of Lawrence, you would be further than 1 kilometer away from this proposal at Don Mills and Eglinton. But what standards do we have for these kinds of things?
So, Mr. Mayor, many of these standards were refreshed and approved by council in the facilities master plan. So generally our standard currently for a large multi-purpose community center is 1 per 35,000 residents. That's the catchment area that we try to serve, and approximately 2.5 to 3 kilometer radius. So in our view, and part of the facilities master plan was looking at taking new community centers and the construction of them with those standards in mind. And that, in fact, is one of the reasons that we were re-looking into all of the community recreation facilities in the Don Mills area, given the new growth that is now happening along, the Eglinton and Don Mills corridor. So through this new facility, we believe that it better matches the standards that we've actually developed around the development of these facilities.
Now, thank you for that. The next issue I wanted to just cover with you, I asked a couple of the deputants, did they think cost effectiveness was a legitimate issue to take into account in making these decisions, recognizing there are many factors, including some raised by them, that should be taken into account. Is there, in fact, I'll call it a cost effectiveness advantage to operating one larger facility as opposed to two? I don't really know the answer to the question. I'm assuming there might.
There certainly is.
There is?
Our experience has been large multi-use facilities can share a number of staff functions, can be more efficient from a utilization perspective, and have lower operating costs per square foot. So it may because of that. In addition to all that, we're also able to provide additional programming. So the accessibility of them is far greater.
I think I heard you mention a minute ago, that in addition to that there had been some surveys undertaken generally, not in this specific area, or you can refer to this specific area if you want, about the community and their views on these kind of larger consolidated facilities versus smaller ones. And is there have you undertaken some surveys over time as part of the preparation of the long-term plan or otherwise?
The surveys, we've done all kinds of surveying, not maybe specifically on that point, but what we do hear from people and what we know through the participation patterns of when we open new multi-use facilities is that they are the busiest and most popular. And when we hear a lot of the surveying we've done and the community consultation that we've done through the master plan, albeit a few years ago, we did hear a frustration about undersized facilities, undersized pools, undersized gymnasiums, and a frustration generally in the community that we weren't able to provide the level of service that matched the needs of the community.
Just back on the Section 37 question and about reopening these agreements, I heard what you said about today we would word those in a way that gave the flexibility, especially given that 10 years, as we've seen very clearly here, or 9, can pass, and sometimes the long-term nature of developments is such that that happens. If you look at before those wordings were put in and we had the more specific prescriptive wording like we have in this one, have there been instances in the past, that where we would have reopened these as it relates to recreational facilities, if I can call it that, just because of the passage of time and the changes that can happen in that time? Is this a sort of stark precedent in this regard, or is it something that is customary, or kind of something in between?
We have amended Section 37 agreements in the past. This one happens to be very specific in sort of how it outlines the specific size of the facility, reference to the cost per square foot, the total value. But we have amended Section 37 agreements on a number of occasions.
My last question is this. You sort of alluded in your presentation, and it's come up a little bit just in a couple of the questions. Are you prepared to embark, sooner than later, in other words, I would say very soon, on a process that would determine some appropriate public use, if this recommendation is accepted by the committee and ultimately by council, for the site at Don Mills and Lawrence, I'll call it that, for a public use for that site? Are you prepared to embark on such a process right away to sort of try and figure out what could be done with that site for a community use?
We certainly will. We've already had some conversations with CreateTO and others cross-divisionally around how we would move forward with determining a usage for that site.
And I believe I heard you saying to Councillor Carroll that you would also be willing to start perhaps with a scan of what the needs were in the community to sort of figure out where you might go with that determination.
That's correct. We would undertake all of that work as expeditiously as possible.
And let's not get into the debate about whether there was adequate or inadequate public consultation. We've heard all opinions expressed this morning, but are you prepared to commit that I'll call it the most local part of this community, the group that are here this morning, obviously not happy with the outcome, would be closely consulted? In fact, maybe that they would be allowed to determine, how much consultation they want. If they want to have 8 meetings instead of 2, but are we prepared to give broad consultation and input opportunities if that process is
Absolutely,
embarked
yes, and we'll make sure to, depending on the direction of council, to engage the MRI and whatever options move forward.
All right. Those were my questions. Is there anybody else with questions for now? Otherwise, we'll conclude the question period and we'll save speeches for after lunch. And I will, however, just think, because it allows us to deal with this item, Councillor Ainsley, the item number EX 7.20, which has to do with these payments we make for railway right-of-ways and so on, where we get, I'll suggest we get ripped off, but you had a motion.
That's the polite way of saying it.
Yes.
Yeah, so I do have my annual motion around railway taxation and how it's dealt with in Ontario. I'm asking for some additional information from staff in future reports. So Ontario, we do railway tonnage by acre. Every other province in this country does it by tonnage. And the two things that I'll point out is that last year we received the same taxation revenue that we did in 2018, even though I can point to a variety of articles that show railway freight tonnage in Ontario was up. And the other thing I'll point out, Mayor Tory, is the comments made by the railways that this is too cumbersome to do, and there's issues around confidential information. Anytime I see a company's reply in that manner to us, usually means we're losing money. So I have this motion to put forward, and I hope everybody will support it. Thank you.
Are there any, there's an amendment here, any questions of staff, any comments to be made? Otherwise, I'm prepared to ask for a vote first on Councillor Ainsley's amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then the item, did you have a, okay, the item is amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Did you have something else? Quicker. If you have one more quick one, we can
One
then,
more for me as well.
You had one as well. Okay, go ahead.
EX 7.28, just a modified motion from the recommendation.
Oh, that's the amendment you circulated earlier on? Yes, the TO lot. So we did have a chance to have that go around, and people have hopefully had a chance to take a look at it. That was here. This is new recommendations that are being inserted, so it's this would become the substitute recommendation.
In essence, we need a MOU between TO Live and the foundation before we can agree to the transfer.
Right, so that's a precondition of this?
Yeah, it's a precondition.
Right, and are there any questions to do with that? Any comments anyone wishes to make? Well, then I'll call the question. All those in favor of Councillor Crawford's amendment, and that becomes the adoption of the item as amended with these new recommendations. Thank you, and then Councillor Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. EX 7.7, I have my questions answered by staff, so I can release that item. That's the Casa Loma Corporation.
7.7 is the Casa Loma Corporation Annual General Meeting and 2018 audited financial statements. And then are you prepared to move the staff recommendations? So Deputy Mayor Thompson moves the staff recommendations in item 7.7. If there are no other questions or comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll resume at 1:30 with the speeches on this matter. Thank you very much.
I'm just trying to sort out, agenda times. Yeah. So, what's my projector? Just so I might do a couple of other meetings, but.
Still have a little bit of time because they did questions on this Don Mills item.
Right.
But they sent 3 speakers.
Okay, I've seen that in the count.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'll show up really quickly, but then they are going back to the top of the agenda and this first.
Oh, so I'm not a. Okay.